threats from the US president to hit the country 20 times harder if it continues to block the Strait of Hormuz. He also suggested that the war could end soon, with his objectives pretty well complete. But former director of the CIA between 2013 and 2017, John Brennan, has told Tonight with Andrew Marr he thinks the conflict will continue.
The Iranians are very patient. They believe that they can outlast the Americans and the Israelis. So I don't think that even if Donald Trump wants to end the war tomorrow or this week, it means that this conflict and this tension between the United States and Iran is going to end anytime soon.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps previously claimed they will be the ones to decide when the war ends. But US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth insists today will be the most intense day of the conflict. Former director of MI6, Sir John Sawles, has told Andrew Marr the regime prevails.
I think we're seeing a continuity of the regime in Iran. The regime is intact, even if their military capability is largely destroyed. And I think this is going to have a radicalising effect. And the new supreme leader has seen his father killed, his mother killed, his wife killed, and his son killed. He's hardly going to be in a generous mood at the end of this conflict.
Meanwhile, British warship HMS Dragon has begun its journey to Cyprus 10 days after an RAF base was hit on the island. The government revealed plans to deploy the Type 45 destroyer as part of efforts to protect Akrotiri last week. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has consistently accused Sir Keir Starmer of being too slow to act alongside the US and leaving our jets just hanging around. Opinion polls have suggested the majority of voters support a more cautious approach. But Conservative Shadow Security Minister Alicia Kearns has told Andrew she doesn't think her party leader is out of touch.
Ultimately, what we were looking to do is how to defend our base and our assets. We were reliant upon the US to protect our assets. Keir Starmer's admitted that. You cannot say to the US with one hand, we need you to defend us, but we're not going to let you use our bases. So if I'm honest, consistently, Kemi has said we need clarity about what is the government's position. And I've struggled sitting there as an opposition MP to understand what are they? What does Keir Starmer want?
Former footballer Joey Barton has been remanded in custody until he appears in court again next month. He's been charged with the assault of a man at a golf club in Merseyside on Sunday. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister has told LBC people won't be asked about whether digital ID should be mandatory. Ministers have started an 8-week consultation over the proposals. Darren Jones has also claimed it could lead to future tax cuts by saving tens of billions of pounds. He says the public service system needs to catch up to those offered by private sector.
What is digital ID? It is the ability to log in to the gov.uk app and then prove who you are. And it's the proving who you are bit which makes all the difference, because at the moment you might be able to log into the HMRC website or the DVLA website or your council website or whatever. There's loads of websites. Sometimes you can log in, sometimes you can't. Other places you've got to get on the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're there for hours. You've got to fill out all this paperwork and send it in the post. It's a complete nightmare.
And drivers on the London Underground will stage a series of 24-hour strikes starting this month. Members of the RMT union will walk out in a row over hours on the 24th of March, then again on 2 dates in both April and May. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 162 points at 10,412. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather, wet and windy tonight with heavy rain pushing in from the west, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours, lows of 6. A breezy day tomorrow with some sunny spells, some blustery showers for Scotland, a high of 13 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's 7 on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. Now, we're going to talk in this hour about what winning this war in Iran actually means. What is your definition of winning? Because Donald Trump's definition seems to have changed an awful lot since he first announced the action in Iran last Saturday or 10 days ago. And then it seemed to be mostly about regime change. Yes, it did mean that they wanted to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, which we thought had happened a few months ago. It also meant destroying Iran's further military, like the Navy. And they do seem to have done that, or according to Donald Trump, they have. Anyway, they appear to have sunk 51 ships. Now, there are all sorts of other things that can be involved in the definition of a victory. But do you think that it's still about regime change? Because we've heard scant little about regime change in the last few days, have we? And I wonder whether the objectives of this mission in Iran seem to have changed. 0345 6060 973. In a sense, it's immaterial as to whether you support what Donald Trump and the Israelis have done in Iran or not. But what to you is the definition of victory? For me, I would say it is destroying the nuclear facilities. It is destroying Iran's ability to fund the likes of Hezbollah and Hamas with weapons. It would mean destroying their drone factories. It would mean destroying their ability to make ballistic missiles. But also, surely, it would mean giving the Iranians a chance to have a relatively normal existence, which they just don't have at the moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Simon Marks joins us, LBC's Washington correspondent. Simon, very good evening to you. Are you clear what the administration means by victory?
Oh, no, absolutely not, Ian, because what the administration means by the purpose of this mission, by the definition of what success looks like, changes constantly, has been throughout the last 10 and 11 days, and is often contradictory with things that they have previously indicated. But as we come on the air this evening, there is a real fear in this city now of the possibility of mission creep. Senior US officials have been briefing members of Congress up on Capitol Hill over the course of the last few hours. And Democrats particularly have emerged from that briefing expressing grave concern publicly that they believe that the administration is planning some kind of deployment of American boots on the ground in Iran. Take a listen to what Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, who is not normally given to hyperbole, had to say when he came out of that briefing. And if you're watching this on camera, I mean, you can actually see the anger and the fury etched on his face after listening to what senior administration officials had told him.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here.
Now, there have been reports separate from that briefing by senior administration officials on Capitol Hill over the last few hours here, that there is consideration being given to sending American troops into Iran, boots on the ground, to try and retrieve some of Iran's stockpile of uranium. You remember the stockpile of uranium that the Trump administration claimed last July had been completely obliterated as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer. As for what is being considered with regard to boots on the ground, that, of course, came up during the White House briefing that was held a little bit earlier here, and here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressing it.
As for boots on the ground, the president has talked about this repeatedly. Wisely, he does not rule options out as commander-in-chief. So, again, I would hesitate to confirm anything that a Democrat on Capitol Hill says right now about the president's thinking.
So taking a slam at the Democrats, but her boss, the president, is the man who just a few days ago told a New York Post reporter that he didn't have the yips about the possibility of putting boots on the ground, unlike previous presidents, by which he meant he wasn't scared of the idea of deploying American troops on the ground in Iran, which would, of course, represent considerable mission creep and put those forces at substantial risk. And talking about risk to American forces, during the course of that briefing, Caroline Leavitt disclosed some new numbers, saying that the ballpark number of American service personnel who have been injured in this conflict stands, she says, at around 140, with 8 of those people severely wounded. As we know, the current death toll stands at 8 members of the US Armed Forces. But none of this is going to come as as any comfort to the families of military service personnel in the region, who themselves are asking in large numbers what the purpose of this mission really is all about, and how is President Trump going to avoid being drawn into exactly the kind of quagmire that he was elected in November of 2024 pledging to avoid.
Simon, thank you. That's Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent. Well, Brigadier General Mark Kimmett joins me now, former US Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, also previously the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. General Kimmett, what is your definition of what victory looks like here?
Well, my definition is quite simple. We left the negotiating table because the Iranians were unwilling to negotiate on the issues of proxies and ballistic missiles, and they were starting to get into the finest detail about their nuclear program. Very similar to what you said. Those are our three core interests: nuclear, ballistic missiles and drones, and proxies. In my mind, anything else than that, and I would agree with the comment that would either be mission creep or boots on the ground. So let's stick to the core issues. If we can't get those goals achieved at the negotiating table, well, let's just get them achieved on the battlefield. And if we are unable to get those achieved on the battlefield, then we should at least use that to compel the Iranians back to the negotiating table. We've got a long history of situations where our adversaries wouldn't negotiate, and then we just used military force to compel them back to the negotiating table.
But the fact is, in the initial press conference that Donald Trump held when these strikes started, he talked a lot about regime change. In fact, he urged Iranian people, when the fighting stopped, to rise up and oust the regime. Now, over the last few days, we've heard none of that talk. Do you think that they've abandoned that as one of the central aims?
Well, first of all, the president never said regime change. He said, we're going to conduct military operations, and those military operations should give the people of Iran the ability to change their regime. So it wasn't those words that everybody associates with Iraq of regime change. It is simply facilitating a military operation to allow the Iranians, if they chose, to change their regime.
But in the end, if the regime doesn't change, there will come a time, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years' time, when they will have rebuilt their military, when they will have maybe rebuilt their ability to create nuclear facilities. So then we go through all the same thing all over again. Surely making regime change an objective, which I think most people think was the objective at the beginning, surely there is some sense to that.
Okay, let's be very clear about regime change. I wrote a paper on this, and regime change would do three things that we've seen in the past. It would require us going in to help with the governance, us bearing the financial burdens, and us having to put boots on the ground. We did that after the Civil War. We did that after the Second World War in both Germany and Japan. Those were taken on. We had more people in Japan post-war than we have in the U.S. Army now. Just significantly incredible costs. If we're going to do regime change, it would certainly be the case that we don't want to do it as was done after the First World War, where the European allies walked away from the job, and 10 years later, Hitler emerged. So we can criticize Iraq, but the fact is, if you're going to change regime, you have to make the commitments that would require significant financial commitments and boots on the ground. And I don't think that's where we're going.
In your opinion, when do you think this war might come to a conclusion? Because if President Trump is right that they've destroyed the Navy, that they're well on the way to destroying ballistic missile facilities, it can't be that far off, can it?
Ian, you're mistaking how one wins wars. You're giving the attrition warfare model. Body counts are important, and somehow the plinking on the ground of all these targets which has been a brilliant military campaign, that brilliant military campaign will not lead to strategic victory in and of itself. What will have to happen is that the combination of the military mission, along with the continuation of sanctions and all the other penalties that we're putting on Iran, has to compel the Iranians back to the negotiating table, because that's where wars end, and that's where surrenders are signed.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Brigadier General Mark Kimmett there. Right, over to you next. What is your definition of victory here? So I think it is quite a difficult one to work out. Sort of, if let's park regime change for a moment. If the objective is to destroy Iran's military capabilities both now and for the future, how do you judge when that's been achieved? I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. Maybe it is only the military that can really answer that question themselves. But if I was President Trump, I'm not sure that I would want to hear the answer that they give, because although the war's only been going on for, 10 days now, is public opinion, both in the United States and indeed the rest of the world, really going to put up with this going on for a lot longer? I don't know the answer to that either. That's why I want to ask you. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 17 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
This is taxation without representation.
Straight to the point.
Do you get giddy with all these U-turns?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Lucky he gets up in the morning, really, isn't it?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
Hi, I'm looking for a pair of jeans.
Right. Low slung, slouchy, wide leg, barrel leg, curved leg, flared, straight or skinny.
Blue?
Fashion. It's hard to keep on top of. Other things, like the upcoming changes to renting, are a bit easier. As a landlord, you will need to get on top of these important changes. They will affect how you manage your tenancies. Act now. Read the guidance at gov.uk/renting is changing.
It's hard to concentrate when you're worried about your health. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. Like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
At AXA Health Insurance, we build our teams with people who care. So when you need us, we're here to support you. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. Pre-existing conditions are not covered.
You're really building that business, Josh. That's because you chose to bank with Virgin Money, earning cash back on your supplies, turning expenses into rewards on everything from Sanders to skip hire. He came, he soared, he conquered. Open Virgin Money's M account for business now. UK excludes NI, Channel Islands and Isle of Man. 18 plus. Terms and exclusions apply. Cashback rate of 0.25% backed by the current account switch service. Virgin Money is a trading name of Clydesdale Bank PLC.
Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 18 minutes past 7 on LBC. Let's take this text here. It's from Miles, who says, in Trump's eyes, victory simply means that the US press have stopped talking about Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, we did talk about that more than a week ago. If you believe that this war was all about deflection tactics, I feel rather sorry for you, because, OK, you can say it is convenient that this is trumping the whole Epstein affair. I completely agree on that. But surely even Donald Trump isn't going to launch this kind of military action just to deflect from the Epstein files, which he says he's been completely exonerated from. Well, no doubt we'll see the reality of that in the future. Right, Grace is in Ealing. Hello, Grace.
Hi. First of all, congrats on your health news. And I think
now I'd better explain what that is, hadn't I?
Oh, sorry.
I was diagnosed with osteoporosis 3 years ago, and I had a DEXA scan yesterday, and the results were that it's been reversed through an annual infusion of adrenalate or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, and doing weights at the gym. So I'm very happy about that. And thank you, Grace.
Well, yeah, I think it's really good that you're letting people know, because I think it's a really important issue, and I think you can certainly reduce the likelihood of future difficulties with osteoporosis by lifting weights. So well done for doing that. And I hope that the procedure wasn't too frustrating or time-consuming waiting around in hospital.
No, not at all. Congratulations to the Royal London Hospital and the Mile End Hospital. Anyway, back to the subject.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's commanders were telling soldiers last week that Trump had been appointed by Jesus to fight, and that we were going to have Armageddon, and we've clearly not had the end of the world, so that's a good thing, I think. Complete misuse of Scripture, not what the Bible says, not what Jesus says. Trump is continually contradicting what Jesus said about the real battle being against sin, and he clearly does not convey any Jesus-like qualities whatsoever. But I do kind of think that it's a bit of a diversion tactic at the same time. I think he wants to look like he's tough to his voters. He's trying to say that he's some kind of hero. Some of his voters actually do believe that he's been sent by God, unfortunately, which is ridiculous. And so he's trying to say he's a tough guy, as well as dissuading people from discussing the Epstein situation, because I do think that has been really significant amongst his base, and that he wants to try and stop his base from thinking about that, given the upcoming midterm elections, because he's really in trouble with.
Well, he is, but what goes against your argument here is the fact that this escapade in Iran is not popular in America at all, just as it isn't here. So if he was seeking to show himself as a strong man and be popular before the elections, he wouldn't have done this, would he?
Well, I don't know. It's quite possible that he miscalculated. I think he's always wanting to try and get attention for himself. So to do something dramatic that gets the press talking about something other than the thing that was losing him supporters, like Marjorie Taylor Greene being the obvious example, that he was losing some of those people, he might have thought, maybe wrongly, maybe he's miscalculated how people would react to this particular situation, and he presumed that all of his MAGA base would get on side, and actually they haven't. But I can imagine him thinking that he'd show himself to be a hero somehow by fighting against Iran. But as you said, what matters ultimately is that the Iranian people should have democracy, and it's so upsetting that he's effectively used this situation for his own ends and doesn't care about those people suffering.
Yes, but these sorts of allegations are made against virtually every leader who indulges in some sort of military campaign. It was said when Margaret Thatcher sent the task force to the Falklands in 1982. A lot of people alleged that, she's so unpopular, she's only doing it because she thinks this is the way she can win the next election. Now, it is true that her popularity did increase after the Falklands War, but anyone that seriously believes that she would have sent thousands of British soldiers, sailors and airmen into battle for her to just become more popular, I think it deserves to go to see a psychiatrist.
Well, I wasn't around in Margaret Thatcher's time, but I'm fairly sure she wasn't as insanely egotistical as Trump is. He just wants to show off that he's a strong man. He thinks he can get his way into heaven by succeeding in various.
I don't think he even believes in God, so I doubt that very much.
Well, no, I don't think he does, but that's what he said. I think he's completely confused in his theology. But I was rewatching last night some of the series called Corridors of Power about American intervention around the world in the last few decades, and it's really depressing how so many people have suffered in various crises, and that's not to necessarily blame America, but the interventions have somehow been miscalculated on many occasions, and not resulted in better peace and democracy for people. But quite often the presidents who were involved, for the most part, had some degree of concern for the human beings on the ground. And I don't get that impression from Trump. I think he is more concerned about showing off power. He said previously he's only constrained by his own morality. I think he's more concerned about showing off than he is about the fact that there are people in Iran who are really suffering.
You are right. He is probably the most narcissistic politician that we've all come across in our lifetimes. I mean, ego and narcissism are not necessarily, they do occur among politicians quite a lot, but not quite to the extent that Donald Trump suffers from these things. But Grace, always good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Let's go to Ned, who's in Cambridge. Hello, Ned.
Hey, Ian. How you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
But the question is, what does victory look like? And it's a really good one. I think it looks like whatever Donald Trump, says it is, quite frankly.
Well, that seems to change day to day, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? But I saw a really interesting post, actually, on social media the other day, gave me a little bit of history, that I didn't know this, but Iraq went to war with Iran for 8 years.
Yeah.
And they got nowhere, and simply being because apparently they did a map of this. So on the west of Iran is a huge mountain range which has enormous pinch points for anything sort of boots on the ground. Same with the north, and on the east is a huge amount of a desert. So if you were going to put a military boots on the ground, tanks, this, that, and the rest of it, there's nowhere for them to go. And they kept Iraq out, being on the border for 8 years. So I just think this is a busted flush, and I think Trump's going to have to pull out quite quickly, because there's absolutely no way boots on the ground is going to work, basically.
But has it been worth it if Iran's military capabilities have been more or less eradicated?
Well, yes. I think when I spoke the other day, so we're no fan of the regime, and I would hope for a really quick closure, because obviously with the economic instability and everything else, and I worry for there's the people on the ground. I think this is all again about ego. Like your previous caller was very clear about this. Let's just stop, messing around with stuff we can't fix. Get out really quickly. Don't commit to things, and just we've had a really hard 20 years as it is. We don't need another war in the Middle East that's going to carry on forever and ever.
But that's an argument for them not having done it in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is what you may believe, and that's absolutely fine. It's a perfectly legitimate point of view. But the fact is that they are in the... Well, they're either in the middle of it or they're sort of nearing the end of it. I don't think this is one of those situations where we're only just at the beginning here. I think that I'd like to think that certainly by this time next month it would all be over. But the fact is, if you have clear military objectives, and they are to destroy their nuclear capability, to destroy their military capability, and make sure that they can't supply supplicants like Hezbollah and Hamas with weapons in the future, well, they're certainly on their way to achieving that, aren't they?
Well, I believe if it was, when we spoke the other day, maybe it was Barack Obama, but not that administration, because it changes every single day, and that's the whole problem with this is there's no certainty at all. I mean, he lies like he breathes, and he'll do whatever it suits him. So that, that's the issue with this whole thing, and. Again, I think the reason why Starmer's been right, the country's, they've not listened to public opinion. It's not popular here. It's not popular there, because we are not in the how can I put it? The right frame of mind.
But you and many other people who've phoned in over the last 10 days seem to be suggesting that we should only go to war if it's popular with public opinion. I mean, that's a ludicrous proposition.
No, I didn't say that at all.
Well, you sort of more than hinted at it.
No, I didn't say that at all. I mean, look, I think, this country's had since the banking crisis, we haven't even been able to breathe. We've had one crisis after another between COVID, Brexit, austerity, everything else, cost of living, et cetera. And we remember, I mean, I'm 54 this year, so I remember the Falklands when I was 10. I remember the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, Afghanistan, the Russians have been there before now, they couldn't get them out, so I keep seeing the same. I'm old enough to see history repeating. It's about chasing oil, chasing money, bombing the Middle East, and it's about time it all stopped, Ian. Quite frankly, it's like every 20 years it comes around again, and we just need to move on, from this.
Yeah, but my fear is if this may well come around again in another 20 years, if the military aims of this expedition are not achieved, because we were told less than a year ago that the bunker-busting bombs had destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they clearly hadn't destroyed them. I think they must have severely curtailed them. But given what we know now, they still think there was something else there that they needed to go for.
What do we know now? I mean, that as you've just said it. I mean, we were told, we annihilated it. So they're lying then, or they're lying now. Which one is it? And I've seen a million reasons for going into war or not going to war, or we're doing this, we're doing that. I think we're a bit smarter than this, Ian. We're a bit smarter than the sort of bombastic of the press front pages and people especially people like Donald Trump, because let's face it, this country doesn't like Donald Trump. They don't like what happened in Gaza, and we've seen through it, particularly in this instance. And I think it's time to give the public a bit of credit rather than the opinions and the drum bangers of the press, somehow to sort of make us feel ashamed that we haven't got involved. I think it's ridiculous, and I think we're smarter than that.
OK, Ned, thank you very much indeed. So we'll come back to more of your calls. What does victory look like in Iran? Plus, Aggie Chambray will be joining me to talk about what's happened with the jury trials legislation, where there have been some votes today in Parliament. I don't think I'm giving anything away if I say it's all been a bit of a damp squib. It's 7:31 on LBC News Headlines with Amelia Cox.
HMS Dragon has begun its journey to the Mediterranean to join the UK's defensive operations in the region. The British warship has been deployed after a drone strike on RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus earlier this month. Former footballer Joey Barton has been remanded in custody after being charged over the assault of a man at a golf club. He's appeared in front of magistrates after the attack in Merseyside on Sunday. And the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister has told LBC the government won't be asking the British public if digital ID should be mandatory as part of a consultation. Darren Jones has claimed it could lead to future tax cuts by saving tens of billions of pounds. LBC weather, wet and windy tonight with heavy rain pushing in from the west, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours, lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC.
When you're smiling,
don't let missing teeth stop you smiling. At Banning Dental, our experts could restore your beautiful smile with premium dental implants. See online for our price match promise. Banning Dental Group Clinics. Keep on smiling.
keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles with you.
BanningDental.co.uk. Idle money lies in your current account, picking crumbs out of its belly button, wondering, should I eat them? But when you start investing with Monzo, your money's always busy. It turns on regular investments, invests your spare change, and tops up your stocks and shares ISA. It even helps you make sense of risk and return. Monzo, the bank that gets your money moving. You could get back less than you invest. Monzo current account required. UK residents 18 plus. T's and C's apply.
Jay here knows that Zoopla can provide valuations for any home in the UK. So we can see what that new couple across the road might have paid.
Ooh la la.
Have a nose at what the curtain twitchers next door could sell for. And even see what his own place is worth.
Cool, look at that.
Plus, Zoopla lets you find and compare local estate agents if you do decide to sell up. Think of all those new neighbours you'll be able to snoop on, Jay. If you want to know, just ask Zoopla.
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:34 on LBC. We'll come back to your calls in a moment on what victory in Iran looks like. I think there's all sorts of definitions of this as we're finding out. But first, let's get the latest from Aggie Chambray, our Deputy Political Editor, on a vote that has just been taking place in the House of Commons. What's it all about, Aggie?
Well, Ian, we've got the results in the last few minutes from this vote in the House of Commons over reforms to the court system, which include plans to reduce the number of jury trials. The government has won that vote with 304 votes versus 203 votes. And there were 9 Labour MPs who voted against, including people
whole 9?
Including people like John McDonnell, John Trickett, Nadia Whittome, Imran Hussain, Ian Byrne. But
not Carl Turner.
No, well, this is interesting. Not Carl Turner. And Carl Turner had actually said during the debate, Carl Turner, of course, is a Labour MP who's been very, very vocally against these plans. He actually at one stage threatened to trigger a by-election because he was so against the plans. But he said during the debate that he'd had a meeting with David Lammy, who's the Justice Secretary, last night. And as a result of that meeting and other conversations he'd had, he was not going to vote against at second reading. So he has abstained. And he is one of 90 Labour MPs who doesn't have a vote recorded. Now, it's always worth stressing when it's no vote recorded, a so-called abstention, that people can have a lot of reasons for not voting. For example, Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, is in that list of abstentions. So I suspect that is probably because she is travelling rather than has an opposition to this. But there are lots of Labour MPs who are extremely worried about this and have decided to, at this stage, abstain and see what happens in the next stages of this bill. And some of them think that the reforms in the bill will be scrapped at committee stage. Indeed, Carl Turner said that he thought parliamentary scrutiny will lead to the worst parts of the bill being stripped out. And I think it's worth explaining that their concern, a lot of the Labour MPs, I've spoken to a lot of the Labour MPs that spoke in the debate who have concerns about it, are concerned about that specific point about jury trials being scrapped for a likely sentence of 3 years. But in the debate, there were some really powerful, remarkable interventions. And one of them was from Labour MP Charlotte Nichols. She gave this speech in the House of Commons. I do have to say, before you listen or watch this, Iain, we're about to hear her discuss issues related to sexual violence, and therefore some people might find it distressing.
I have spoken before in this place about having PTSD as the result of being the victim of a crime, but I have never specified the nature of that crime, and in doing so, I'm aware that I am waiving my right to anonymity and the personal consequences that come along with that. I care profoundly about rape victims facing intolerable delays for their day in court. I know only too well what that feels like, as after being raped at an event that I attended in my capacity as a Member of Parliament, I waited 1,088 days to go to court. Every single one of those days was agony, made worse by having a role in public life that meant that the mental health consequences of my trauma were played out in public, with the event that led to my eventual sectioning for my own safety still being something that I receive regular social media abuse from strangers about to this day. But here's the kicker. In this debate, experiences like mine feel like they've been weaponised and are being used for rhetorical misdirection for what this bill actually is. The violence against women and girls sector haven't had the opportunity to come together to discuss it, and the government's framing and narrative has been to pit survivors and defendants against each other in a way I think is deeply damaging. We have been told that if we have concerns about this bill, it is because we have not been raped or because we don't care enough for rape victims. The opposite is true in my case. It is because I have been raped that I'm as passionate as I am about what it means for a justice system to be truly victim-focused. It is because I have endured every indignity that our broken criminal justice system could mete out that I care what kind of reform will actually deliver justice for survivors and victims of crime more widely. We promised in our manifesto specialist rape courts. This bill isn't that.
Wow.
Wow, that was Charlotte Nichols speaking there. She said she'd spoken before in the comments about a crime being committed to her and her experience of the court system, but never before spoken about what exactly happened. A really powerful intervention from her. There were many, many other Labour MPs I mentioned who were very critical of this bill. John Trickett, who, of course, I mentioned he voted against. In the end, one of the 10 Labour MPs who voted against branded the plan oppressive, authoritarian too. I think it is worth noting, Iain, that the battle on this from Labour MPs is far from over. Yes, a massive chunk of them didn't vote today rather than voted against, but I think that's because a lot of them are still wanting to see what happens at the committee stage, want to see what happens in the Lords, and may well vote against it at third reading.
You were talking about Carl Turner earlier. You'll never guess what, Aggie. He's on cross-question at 8.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure he will have a lot to say, as he had a lot to say in the comments.
I'm going to say, why did you wimp out of voting against? I mean, if you feel so strongly about it, very bizarre, I think, to just say, oh, we'll leave it till the later stages. Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Right, back to your calls on the war in Iran, or the war over Iran, I suppose we should describe it as. What does victory look like? Because Donald Trump seems to be a tad confused about that. Gary's in Wolverhampton. Hello, Gary.
Evening, Ian. That's just knocked me a bit sideways, that did, Charlotte's response.
Well, I mean, Charlotte comes on cross-question quite a lot, and she's always somebody that I've really rated over the years. She's not a robotic MP. She says what she thinks, and she says it from the heart. And I mean,
no, mate. Honestly, because I wasn't expecting to follow that, and I'm quite emotional about what's just been said there in the house.
Well, I don't blame you.
As an ex-soldier and a protector, and somebody that 35 years ago was coming back, well, I've just landed back on a hospital plane from the first Gulf, having been injured. And I'm just thinking, I'm going to start. I'm here now. Victory should look like, for the people that live in that country. Because all the beautiful people, I haven't been to Iran, but I've been down the Middle East, mate, and, get a grip. Right, I've got a grip now, I have, Ian. Let's get a conversation going, kid. Come on.
You're all right. Do you take your time?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. Yeah, I'm sound. No, it's emotional, isn't it? Because that's these people's lives we're dealing with here, isn't it? You know what I mean? And even the criticism that's going out to the Royal Navy and the ship that's been in dock, and HMS Dragon's underway now, and our brave Navy are going to go out there and protect. And, it's the politicians that they need a kicking, mate. It's nothing to do with my brothers and sisters who we swear to protect this country, and that's what we'll always do.
And you're absolutely right to say that. And I think that any criticism that anybody has given out about what's happened, particularly with our country, it's not criticism of the armed forces. It is a criticism of those that lead the armed forces, in particular, the politicians who give them directions to either do something or not to do something.
Honestly, it bleeds, mate. I know. I've still got enough people, enough of my mates are still serving, doing various roles. I've got people who, in the SAS and mates of mine, right? So top echelons through to other people who I've still got enough people and my friends who are still serving, and that sort of commentary, it bleeds down. It does. It really affects morale. It really does.
Gary, thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's take this text from Miles. I disagree with you, Ian. Going to war absolutely should not happen without public approval. Above any other governmental action, politicians should not drag their populations into wars they have no interest in participating in. I have to disagree with you there, Miles, because if we go back to the 1930s, the general public was totally against rearmament in the 1930s. And I think that hampered our efforts to fight Hitler when we did actually go to war. There was no enthusiasm for war in 1939. You look at the Iraq War, where there was genuine enthusiasm. All the opinion polls showed that 50 to 60% of the British public supported the war in Iraq. Now, that opinion changed fairly rapidly, it has to be said. But I don't think politicians should make decisions about military action based on whether it's going to be popular or not. We elect politicians to make decisions on our behalf, and whether they're popular or not, I mean, that decides, I suppose, in a sense, whether they win the next election. But I mean, just remember, Tony Blair won a third election victory after the war in Iraq. So, I mean, I think to base your decision on military action as to whether you have public opinion behind you at the time you take that military action, I just think is not the way it should work. Your job as a politician, whether you're the Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, Defence Secretary, or just an ordinary member of Parliament, your job is to try to explain why you're doing this and the consequences of not doing it. and then you have to suffer the consequences. If you can't explain it, you see, I don't think the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, or his government have explained properly as to why they haven't done anything. I'm not suggesting that they should have gone in with the Americans and the Israelis and bombed Iran, but I still don't think that they've explained adequately why they refused to give permission and why they still haven't really moved much of our military to the Middle East. I think that does need explanation. 0345 6060 973. It's 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Reeves warns of cost of living rises, war in Iran hikes energy prices. This is ludicrous. The AA saying drive less to save on fuel and also brake less. Does anyone now actually go for a drive just for the fun of it? Let's go for a run out. No one does that. With the cost of fuel, with the cost of insurance, the appalling state of the roads, no one goes for a drive for fun anymore. So the idea of the AA saying drive less and don't brake too hard or brake less, well, if you can tell me you've gone out for a nice run lately, I'd be amazed.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
If you were missold a home on a holiday park, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive compensation. Text ADVICE to 78900.
My name's Mark and this is my NHS story. The sensation in my neck was painful all the time. Once I spoke to my GP, they referred me to my CDC. They got me in very, very quickly. The amount of pain I went through for something so easy, why hadn't I done this 4 months before?
The government is opening new community diagnostic centres, with many already available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so the NHS can be there for all of us when we need it. Find your closest one at gov.uk/NHS Fit for the Future, available England-wide.
Shine Night Walk London is a 10k, half marathon or full marathon supported walk around the city at night on the 19th of September to raise vital money for Cancer Research UK. It's also
everyone walking with all their colours, twinkling away. We can actually see how nice London is, and London is different at night time.
Celebration of life, and it gives hope, being able to raise money for Cancer Research UK.
Step towards a brighter future and sign up at shinewalk.org. Together, we are beating cancer.
A Thameslink train is a place where you can wind down and catch up. A chance to let conversations flow and plans unfold. And swap doom scrolling for telling stories. Too good for the group chat. Make the journey part of the joy and save 1/3 with off-peak group tickets at thameslinkrailway.com. Terms apply.
At Amazon, over 50% of deliveries now come with less packaging or with no added packaging at all. It's a difference you'll notice on your doorstep, where you chat with friends, where your neighbour's daughter practices guitar, and where we deliver your new noise-cancelling headphones in the manufacturer's packaging. Ah, much better. Reduced packaging from Amazon. We're delivering change where it matters, on your doorstep. Based on 2025 Amazon packaging data across the UK and EU.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:48 on LBC. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question in just 12 minutes' time. Carl Turner, Labour MP for Hull East. Lord David Frost, former Brexit Minister, and now Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Sam Lister, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Express. And Zoe Williams, the Guardian columnist. So that should be a spicy one after 8. The lines are open for your questions right now. But first, let's go back to your calls on Iran. John's in Reading. Hi, John.
That sounds like a good lineup, that does.
I think it does, doesn't it? You see, Corey and Chris do a remarkable job under very severe circumstances, working for me.
So I wanted to. Obviously, I had my idea of what I was going to say to you, but something you said before the break has sort of got me quite interested as well. So what I think that Keir Starmer is not explaining to the general public is a very simple one, is that he wants there to be some form of negotiation or be an ability to negotiate with the Iranians after the war is ended. Because if we basically go and blow up random parts of Iran, I'm just throwing this out there, if it sounds like the RAF basically to blow up several different parts of Iran, then he's got very little ability to actually negotiate with the Iranians. That's just an additional point that I was going to make. Simply because of what I heard you say a second ago, Iain.
Well, I mean, in terms of negotiations, there were negotiations going on in Oman between America and Iran. They weren't getting anywhere, as they very rarely ever do with Iran. And Donald Trump clearly lost his patience. Now, I think it's quite difficult to say, well, at the end of this, let's have more negotiations with Iran, because, first of all, it's quite difficult to see exactly who would be, or I'd say who the Americans would be talking to. Donald Trump has made clear that he doesn't rate or doesn't want to talk to the new supreme leader. I mean, he wouldn't be the one involved in the negotiations anyway, I suppose. But it's going to be very interesting to see if this regime survives, what the power dynamics are within the regime.
So it also, that's true. And one thing that you've just said a second ago is leading to like a point I was going to make, was his ability to basically do things off the fly is sort of a negative thing against him. So, for example, he has an ability to deal with the crisis with, especially, so you've got the major crisis basically that the American military have got at the moment is these £3,000 or $3,000 drones that Iran have got in stockpiled en masse that they can send with little explosives, and then the American military are sending these hundreds of £1,000 missiles to basically blow them out of the sky, which is unaffordable, and they'll run out of them as quick as possible. You've got someone, for example, like Zelensky, who has an ability to build, like I think he spoke last time, it was a question I asked basically to the panel last time we spoke. And so Zelensky's got this ability to build these interceptors en masse, but it involves Donald Trump basically negotiating with Zelensky, and he just doesn't want to do that because he can't physically do that. Because he doesn't want to. It's in him to basically go, Zelensky, I was wrong, because he's constantly getting all of his information from Donald Trump. He's getting his information from from Putin. He's getting his information from right-wing news sources, basically, where he saying don't deal with Zelensky. But there's a perfectly good way of him dealing with a lot of this. And that's what you're going to find, for example, and this is the first point I was going to make to you, is that a lot of these Gulf state countries which have American bases which are getting constantly attacked in them, at some point they're going to say, we don't want American bases in our countries because they're constantly getting attacked. And it's inviting basically these drone attacks, these missile attacks from Iran and other countries. And it's affecting these countries.
You may be right. I don't think you are. I think the opposite will happen, because surely if you have an American base in your country, and just because you've had these drone attacks, which, I mean, they have caused some damage, they've caused a few casualties, not that many, it has to be said. If I was, look, I can't put my head in the head of a Gulf state head of state, but I would have thought all of this would underline the case for having an American base in your territory.
So what if you've got, for example, and we heard it, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where you had the Iranian president basically said, if you have an American base in your country, we will target that base. But if you don't have an American base in that country, we will not target your country with military action. And then that, because you've got a lot of these, for example, continue, go on.
Well, I was going to say that, if you just bow down to that kind of threat, what kind of political leader are you? That's
very true. But you've got, for example, these countries where, for example, Dubai, you've got places like the UAE who are basically going, right, the America basically isn't defending our country, and we're getting attacked left, right and centre with these drones, and we've got hotels being blown up, and we've got people being killed. Or we've got this other example where if we just remove the American base entirely, then there's a chance that they may stop attacking us. You may also find, for example, this is another idea that may happen, is that they stop trading oil with America and start moving towards China, simply because it's far more. What's the sort of word?
Well, what you're doing, and I really don't mean this in a bad way, John, but you're kind of advocating appeasing the Iranians, and I don't think that's ever worked.
No, I don't think it works either. But this is what Donald Trump should have done. Is he basically should have gone to someone like Zelensky? Can you provide us with drones? Can you provide us ways of defending these countries while we basically deal with targeted strikes or good, solid, old-fashioned diplomacy and negotiation with people who are more moderate in the Iranians. Otherwise, you could have basically gone what he's gone, but he could have gone with the UK. He could have gone with France. He could have built, for example, I told Keir Starmer literally like a week in advance, Keir, by the way, we're going to send the military in and blow up several different parts of Iran, giving us enough time to basically put enough defensive equipment in.
Well, again, I don't really buy that argument because it was quite clear what was going to happen. We've known about the moves from American aircraft carriers into the Gulf for many, many weeks now. It didn't take Einstein to work out what was going to happen. Okay, it might have been useful to know the exact timing, but I think if you're an American leader, whether it's Donald Trump, frankly, or anybody else, you're always going to worry that these plans would leak. And the more countries you tell, the more chance of that happening. And we know that the Americans, I think, have been quite suspicious of Britain in terms of being able to keep things secret for some time.
No, that's true. But that's sort of the way I'm looking at it at the moment, is where there is a way for Donald Trump to basically deal with these scenarios, but it just involves him actually being able to sit down and negotiate, and that's just not one of his techniques. He is a gung-ho sort of shooter.
They were negotiating with the Iranians, but getting absolutely nowhere. And in the end, you can't just have negotiations going on for 10 years and not getting anywhere. So I think that the trigger for this action was the fact that they came to the conclusion that the Iranians weren't serious in these negotiations, so they went in. John, thank you. Let's go to David in South Woodford. Hello, David.
Hello, Ian. If I can quickly pick you up on these negotiations, you said they're not going anywhere. Oman were hosting the negotiations, and their foreign minister is on record as saying that the talks are very advanced, and Iran was very close to agreeing not to stockpile any nuclear material. And then the Israelis and Americans attacked. So that's what the Omanis are saying, and they were actually hosting the negotiations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. Yeah. The Americans clearly took a different view.
Yeah, well, we all know what the Americans have done. They're formed for negotiating and then bombing. But coming back to what victory looks like, I think Iran is actually controlling everything. They're controlling the geography, which bases, consulates, countries to hit, in what waves. The American Navy is nowhere near to be seen in the Strait of Hormuz. They won't even dare go there. They're docked up near India. To get, that's where they are. So America is bombing from the air, destroying.
Well, no. They've got two aircraft carriers in that region.
Not in the Strait of Hormuz. They're actually far away from the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, why would it be blocked with oil? Look at the price of oil. Why has it gone up when there's no oil coming out? So
I can't give you a pinpoint location for these aircraft carriers, but my understanding was that they were in the region, and i.e. not near India.
No, they're actually getting logistical support from India. That's the safest place they can be, which is quite a bit of a distance off, but you can check it online. The other point I want to make is they're running out of interceptor missiles. These Patriots and all these missiles, they're very low on stocks. So if this carries on for another week or so, there'll be no interceptor missiles left.
Well, where's that information coming from?
Well, a typical Patriot missile takes about 2 years to make. So this is what the Iranians did. They fired their cheap drones up front to neutralize the numbers of Patriot missiles. You can imagine how many interceptors over how many countries. You got all the Arab countries. You got Israel that is running very low now in stock. So this is where, and plus the economic pressure, this is where Trump's going to be under so much pressure that he's going to have to walk away and say he's won when he actually hasn't won.
Well, if you're right on that, that is going to be an interesting eventuality, because it would mean that the Iranian missiles and drones have not been completely destroyed. And that would become fairly evident within a very short time. So, David, thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, coming up in the next hour, it is Cross Question. On our panel tonight, we have Carl Turner, the Labour MP for Hull East. He feels very strongly about jury trials, so I'd be very disappointed if no one asked a question about the legislation going through Parliament at the moment on that. We have Lord David Frost, a non-affiliated peer and the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. You may remember he was the Brexit negotiator under Boris Johnson. Sam Lister is Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Express, and Zoe Williams, Guardian columnist. They're all going to be here to answer your questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp on that number, you can text 84850, and of course, you can watch the whole programme now on Global Player on the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, we're a step closer to a reduction in the number of jury trials in England and Wales. David Lammy's court changes have been supported by MPs, 304 to 203 at their first Commons hurdle. The Justice Secretary told MPs earlier there is nothing progressive about a rape victim waiting years for their day in court. Many Labour backbenchers abstained in the votes, but Labour's Belle Ribeiro-Addy voted against.
I have a close friend who is a survivor of rape. He was alarmed by this proposal, and after a 3.5-year wait for her trial, the delay made her suicidal. She desperately wants action on court backlogs, but opposes this and is outraged that her trauma and that of thousands of survivors is being used to justify what she sees as effectively as a cost-cutting exercise.
The Royal Navy destroyer HMS Dragons left the UK to help protect Cyprus as the Middle East conflict continues. Catherine Beasley waved goodbye to her husband, Jacob Birch, who was on board as the ship left Portsmouth.
Exciting because it's what he's been training for. I'm pregnant and we're quite sad because I don't know when he's going to be back. He hasn't said much, to be honest. It's all very much under wraps, but yeah, I know he'll be safe and he'll be fine and he'll come home.
The White House claims the military is working on drawing up ways of keeping ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Delays in oil exports have led to steep hikes in prices. Former footballer Joey Barton has been remanded in custody after appearing in court charged with an assault near a golf club. He'll next appear in court for a plea hearing next month. The government claims digital ID could lead to future tax cuts as it saves tens of billions of pounds. Ministers have opened an 8-week consultation into the proposals. Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones.
Digital public services won't just be more efficient, but they can also be cheaper to run too. Current system of paper forms, manual payment systems and duplication means that every time you have to repeat your story to a different part of government, it's a second, a third, a fourth cost to the taxpayer.
And a prisoner due in court tomorrow charged with murder following the death of killer Ian Huntley. The 52-year-old died in hospital on Saturday after being attacked in prison last month. He'd been serving a life sentence for killing 10-year-old girls Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in 2002. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 162 points at 10,412. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, wet and windy tonight with heavy rain pushing in from the west, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours, lows of 4 to 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Always take your doctor's advice. Search NHS antibiotics.
You saw me, walking along the beach. You watched me turn round the headland, and the tide, it cut me off. The rocks were wet, too wet to climb, so I panicked. But you didn't. You dialed 999 and asked for the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
And I just want to say, whoever you are, thank you.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard.
I'm a real snack monster. But Mum and Dad says all that munching isn't good for me. Around half the sugar we eat comes from unhealthy snacks and sugary drinks. If you want to change from a snack monster to a snack star, search Change for Life for loads of healthy snacking ideas.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and a very good evening to you. It's 3 minutes past 8. Welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question. On the panel with me today, we have to my right Sam Lister, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Express. We have Lord David Frost, non-affiliated peer, also Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, and of course former Brexit Minister. To my right, we are, I'm told, going to have Zoe Williams here, the Guardian columnist. I haven't got a tub of lard. And if you think that's rude, that was what Have I Got News for You used to do if somebody didn't turn up. To her right, we have Carl Turner, Labour MP for Hull East. He's just hot-footed it over from the House of Commons, having voted, or possibly not, in the jury trials debate. Well, I'm sure we'll come on to that over the course of the programme. So if you've got a question for our panel, you know the number to call, 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, on the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to Billy in Ventnor on the Isle of Wight. Hello, Billy.
Hello, good evening, Ian, and good evening, panel. My question is, given what we have seen happen to the global economy since the start of the war in Iran, do you think politicians are going to have to now step in to prevent the inevitable boom and bust that we've seen in previous years? Because, as a famous James Carville once said, it's the economy stupid.
David Frost.
Gosh. Well, I mean, politicians step in to manage the economy all the time over everything that happens, so there won't be anything new if they do on this. I think what we're seeing at the moment is a shock. Obviously, nobody was quite expecting this. We're seeing oil and gas prices leap up, and that's going to have some effects on inflation and negative on growth in this country if it's sustained. And of course, that's what we don't know. My belief is that market economies are extremely strong machines to adjust to these sort of shocks. So give it time, and I'm sure we'll see things adjusting. This country's got enough problems already without getting involved in another energy price subsidy, another round of public spending to try and deal with this problem.
Do you think this has the potential, though, to throw Rachel Reeves' whole economic strategy off course?
Well, it's a bit difficult to tell because I'm not quite sure what her economic strategy is in the first place. But undoubtedly, it's made her life more difficult. There's no doubt that if this is sustained, it's going to pull growth down even further. It was already going to be pretty bad. It's already going to push inflation up. That's clear. And we may have a significant supply problem. Who knows if this lasts? So it's definitely made her job more difficult. It already was pretty difficult, unfortunately.
Sam?
Yeah, I think clearly with the pressure on energy prices, I don't think realistically you see the impact of that domestically for about 3 months, which obviously will take us into the summer months. So hopefully for individuals, that side of it wouldn't be too onerous in the short term. But for businesses, it still will be. For example, pubs, we already know, really struggle to keep their heating on, to even keep the fridges running, the kitchens running and all that kind of stuff. So I think for businesses, that really will be a problem. We go back to how much do you want to intervene? We saw, obviously, during COVID, huge amounts of intervention. I think most people would agree rightly at the time because of the situation we were in. But clearly we can't carry on doing that every time there is some kind of global shock. I think really, though, if you're thinking about long-term Rachel Reeves, you can see the political pressure already. Reform Today with their stunt up in Buxton. They went to a petrol station. They paid out of Reform coffers to reduce the cost of petrol at the pump. There clearly will be a big...
What do you mean they paid?
So Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick went up to this petrol station in Buxton. They paid from Reform Party coffers to reduce the cost for each driver that day by 25 pence on the litre, as part of their strategy to promote their new fuel policy.
Law against that.
Well, they do say they've checked this. They've checked it, and they're pretty sure because there was no
treating. It's called.
There was no quid pro quo in terms of votes, so they're pretty sure that legally they're fine on this. But you can see that this will become a real big political hot potato over the next few months.
Carl Turner.
Well, I think first of all, I think the stunt that Farage and Robert Jenrick pulled off today was tantamount to treating. I suspect the legality of it is that it's not inside an election period.
Yeah.
That's why it's not unlawful.
Not far away, though, are we?
But I think it's fairly dodgy, if I can put it like that. Look, the reality is I'm confident that Rachel Reeves will be considering the effect of this new latest global shock. I suspect Treasury ministers and officials will be working hard to see what mitigations, if any, can be mustered. But I agree with David. Look, the reality is we're up against it. We're under the cosh. There's not an awful lot of money to be found. But I think the politics of it is punters expect help when, in fact, things are tough. And I think Rachel, politically, will be trying to find an answer. I think we need to calm it down a little bit for the moment. It's early days, but if this continues much longer, there's bound to be a reaction.
Because timing is everything in this, isn't it? And I remember back in 2022 when Liz Truss brought in the sort of energy price cap, which was hugely expensive, not something that I think anybody really imagined that she would do. But it kind of got obscured because the Queen died, and I think it was being announced that the day. It was either the day before the Queen died or the actual day. But if you get these things too late, they can be really electorally damaging, can't they?
I think that's fair. I do. I think that's fair. And that's why I say I think the Chancellor will be already working hard with ministers and officials to see what mitigation might be available, if any, frankly. The statement, which was a few days ago.
It's already out of date.
It was out of date before she even got to her feet.
Yeah.
Unbelievably, and those factors, can't be planned for. If we believed the president of the US, Donald Trump, he says it's going to be all over in a matter of hours. Let's see what happens. I suspect is a little bit too optimistic. I think this may go on for a longer period than any of us would want it to.
Right, let's take a follow-up text question from Andrew, who says the British Chambers of Commerce have downgraded its UK growth forecast, and many businesses are also concerned about minimum wage rises and business rates rises coming in April, which could lead to more unemployment and further inflation. With the US war on Iran also now potentially impacting inflation as well as possibly interest rates, what actions should the Chancellor take to help working people and improve our poor economic situation? Or do they think the Chancellor will actually do very little and simply blame the war and everyone else for our ongoing economic woes? Now, just a bit of background to this. The British Chambers of Commerce now predict the economy will grow by only 1% this year, having previously said it expected a 1.2% growth. Meanwhile, the Office for Budget Responsibility has warned that the war could push inflation in the UK to almost 3%. Well, I think it's already 3%, isn't it? I think it could go a lot higher than that. Of course, that also has consequences like for pensions, because I think is it July that the pension increases are set? Well, if September. Well, if inflation went up to sort of 5, 6, 7%, that would be very consequential for public spending. Sam.
Yeah, exactly that. Obviously, at the Express, we have always resolutely stood behind the triple lock, but obviously there are consequences. Inflation obviously went up to 10%, 11% during COVID, and consequently we did see those rises. And so I think that the knock-on impact of this is clearly very, very huge. I think you're absolutely right. I think that the hope that this will be a few days, a few weeks, we've learned the lessons of history, and we've seen time and time again when you go in, it's never a few days and a few weeks. And I'm gravely concerned about the economic impact. I don't think there's any way we can paint a rosy picture at all on that.
Carl, yesterday we did the first of our programme on what the economic impact might be, and are people already sort of getting a little bit concerned about what might happen? And sometimes when you do those sorts of phone-ins, you don't get masses of calls, but there were masses of calls yesterday, which okay, it's anecdotal evidence, but I think people are starting to really think, my local petrol station, diesel's now 155. Yesterday it was 150. The day before it was 145. People are going to start feeling the pinch, aren't they?
Well, I was shocked, Ian, the very day after Trump went in to Iran with Israel, when there was queues forming outside of petrol stations in my constituency. It was a surprise to me. I ought to have expected it, but of course I didn't. And I think it spoke to me that people are genuinely under the cosh and they're very, very concerned about household budgets. I was in the pub a couple of days after speaking to an employer, and again, from the text message, it's right. He was telling me that he can't afford the minimum wage to be increased. But when I spoke to him in better detail, he said, look, he doesn't mind paying his loyal staff what they deserve to earn, but what's more concerning to him is the national insurance contribution hike, which I think we was too clever by half, perhaps, to do it in the way that we did it. And the problem with it was, for me, it affected not-for-profits and charities as well. And it's not-for-profits and charities during the austerity years that kept communities going, frankly. So I think we've made mistakes in terms of how we're managing things. But I think I've got every confidence in Rachel Reeves. I think she's an excellent Chancellor. My dear little daughter received a letter from her the other day wishing her well, because my daughter's just recovering from an operation. So I mustn't criticise the Chancellor of the Exchequer, because my 9-year-old Stella will be very cross with me.
And we wouldn't want that. And get well soon, Stella, if you're listening or watching. David?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt people feel under the cosh, and the reason is that the economy has almost stopped growing, and this is the result of decisions that have been taken, yes, in the last couple of years under Labour, but also for the past decade or so under the previous government. The economy's gradually silted up, growth has gone to almost zero, and incomes are not rising and prices are, and that's the reality of this. What needs to happen is, it would have been much better not to have the tax rises last year. It would have been much better not to have the new Employment Act that's coming in. It would have been much better not to push up welfare spending. It would have been much better not to double down on net zero, which is a big part of the deindustrialisation of the country. Let's not forget, we've got the highest industrial energy costs in the OECD, the second highest domestic electricity costs in the OECD. People really feel this, and there's no solution other than reversing some of this out. You can't solve the problem by taxing more, moving money from one place to another. We've got to get the productive capacity.
Some people, of course, would say that Brexit hasn't.
Exactly.
Brexit has had no measurable effect one way or the other on the economy. The problems go back much further. They go back to the financial crash.
Well, there's all these economists that say that the economy would be growing 4% quicker had we not Brexited.
They do say that. I'm sure you've already read my long piece in the Telegraph on Saturday, in which
Full enough, I have.
I tried to resist some of this stuff. The truth is, Brexit probably perhaps had an effect of 1% on GDP. We've perhaps gained that from some of the reforms we've done since then. When you look at the graphs, you can't even see Brexit in the charts. We're performing, unfortunately, roughly as badly as the French and the Germans, and that hasn't changed through Brexit.
But we'd be performing better, surely. I mean, to leave a single market, 500 million people, trading on equal terms, to be in a situation where we're competing, frankly, more globally as a result of leaving a single market of our very nearest neighbours, David. The reality is, I'm sorry to say, you've got to concede that Brexit hasn't helped with the economy. Come on, be honest.
I don't concede it. I concede the point I just made now, which is there's a small effect, a one-off effect from leaving single markets in the customs union. We've had that effect. We're able to do other things and liberalise. We're not part of the EU's AI rules, for example. We've been able to reduce our tariffs so we can buy cheaper food from the rest of the world. These things are balancing out. I wish we'd done much more. We needed to do much more to liberalise and make a difference. But honestly, you cannot look at the figures and say there's been a meaningful effect from Brexit. The problems go back much, much further to the productivity shock in 2008. And that is something that governments of both colours have failed to deal with, unfortunately.
Right, we'll move on to some other subjects in just a moment and update you on the whereabouts of Zoe Williams. If you've seen her, do let us know, because she still hasn't arrived. 18 minutes past 8. Never trust a Guardian journalist.
This is LBC. Whether you still own it or not, if you had a diesel car built between 2009 and 2020, you could be entitled to compensation. Checking takes minutes at jointheclaim.com, and if successful, compensation could be worth thousands. Diesel emissions claims are still open for Ford, Nissan, Renault, Mercedes, BMW and Jaguar Land Rover. Don't miss out. Join millions of drivers across the UK. Check your vehicle now at jointheclaim.com.
Join the claim!
With a gift in your will to UNICEF, you'll know that the job of making a better world for every child is in good hands. It'll be the start of an incredible journey, connecting you with a powerful community of people working tirelessly to protect and nurture children so they're empowered to take on the world. To find out more about leaving a gift in your will that never stops working for children, search UNICEF Legacy for a free guide today.
On a windswept walk in Carmarthen, while someone tries to use your card details to hire a speedboat in Cannes. This is the moment that you relax, knowing that Barclays advanced tech has helped to spot the fraud in under a second, and their expert team are on hand to close it down. So you can get back to being windswept. Oh, just one of the ways we're protecting our customers 24/7. Search Barclays Fraud Protection. Barclays, backing your future.
Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
It's 8:20. Zoe Williams still isn't here. So we've moved Carl Turner nearer the body of the Kirk so he can answer questions. Well, the fact is, when you have three panellists, they all have more time, so they all quite like it when one's missing. But anyway, we still hope to see Zoe at some point. Right, a text question from Frank in Westminster. I should just reintroduce the panel in case you've just joined us. Lord David Frost is here, Director General of the IEA. Carl Turner, Labour MP for Hull East, and Sam Lister, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Express. Right, Frank's question. If regime change does not happen in Iran, how disastrous will the consequences be? Carl?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert, really, if I'm honest, and I'm not really on top of the detail, but I think the reality is it's incredibly concerning that the US administration didn't really know why they were going in. It was initially regime change, it then changed the tune to something else. I mean, frankly, I think it's been a bit of a mess, and I think Keir Starmer was right to resist going in on the very first day without giving it some serious consideration, taking legal advice, and then when he thought that there was a need to defend military bases, he agreed to join in to an extent. I think we're in the right position. I think that's where the country are as well.
David?
Well, I think that if this does not end with regime change, or at least a significant knock to the regime, it's going to be pretty bad, because they will be seen to have, fought off the great Satan in America and come out victorious, and that's not going to be very good for the region. I think the wider question, it's always difficult to comment on foreign policy because governments know so much more than us commentators. They have so much more information. They don't, we don't really know how close Iran was to a nuclear weapon or to ballistic missiles and so on. We have to take a certain amount on trust. I would prefer Britain to be a slightly closer ally to the US in return for what we used to have, which was more engagement in decisions, a deeper special relationship, a greater sense of what was happening and why, and being able to contribute to that, which is I guess a way of saying I wouldn't have started from here.
That could be the answer for every question, I think, couldn't it? Sam?
Yeah, I think I would agree with both Carl and David. It's very difficult to know, isn't it? Because we don't really know what Donald Trump's initial aims were. I mean, he has changed his position so many times. It's really hard to have a kind of measurable success.
Well, he's not talking about regime change anymore, is he?
He's not.
I mean, to be fair, he didn't actually ever use that phrase. No. Even in that first speech or press conference he gave, he was sort of more or less urging the people to rise up when the military action ends. But he didn't actually use that phrase, which we possibly need to remember a bit better.
I think, politicians do like to leave a bit of wiggle room, in their answers, don't they? So I think he clearly did that. But actually, with Donald Trump, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because he will pivot on the head of a pin at any given moment. And doesn't really seem to be bound by anything he ever says. It doesn't seem to, the normal rules don't seem to apply to him at all. But I think the wider issue, really, what do we want as a nation? We don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And I think that surely has to be the top and bottom of this. That has to be the aim. The regime change, I mean, we are haunted by Blair, aren't we, in Iraq? And also, I would venture Cameron and Libya. We very rarely talk about Libya anymore. We went in there and that was all 48 hours of madness, and then we never talk about it again. And so I think regime change has a very kind of nasty odour for the British, because we have been badly burnt by that as a concept. But I don't think anybody here would be upset to think that Iran has been rid of its nuclear missile capabilities, and surely that has to be that surely has to be a kind of good outcome.
Right, Richard is in Brentford. Richard, hi, what would you like to ask?
Oh, good evening, everybody. I think I've got a really good question, but I can't
We'll
phrase
be the judge
it
of
very
that.
well. I can't phrase it very well. Your research has really tried to help me. What I don't understand is jury trials. It's between 95 and 98% of trials now are dealt with not by juries. They're dealt with by magistrates and district judges, over 95%. So for people who argue it's a disaster for an extra 0.5% of cases, maybe smaller, aren't going to be dealt with by juries, what do they say about the 98% or whatever the figure is of cases that are currently not dealt with by juries? I mean, if they're saying it's unfair to have a trial without a jury, there's an awful lot of unfair trials taking place at the moment.
Well, as I know to my cost a couple of weeks ago, a lot of these are speeding cases. You wouldn't expect to have a jury in a speeding case, would you?
No, you get burglaries and thefts. I mean, there's a lot of cases travel either way, serious cases. Strangely, not rapes. You've broadcast tonight 2 women victims who are very worried about this. I don't know why they're worried about it. It's not going to affect their cases. But the point, a lot of serious cases are handled by other than juries, and it's always seemed to me a dishonest disagreement. You know, if it's unfair not to have a jury, we shouldn't have anybody tried by anybody other than the jury.
Right, Carl Turner, your time has come.
Well, 90% of cases dealt with by the magistrates. That's true. The rest of the cases are triable either way. Of those cases, 10% go up to the Crown Court for a trial. I think 7% of that percentage plead guilty, leaving 3%. 3% means in real terms 14,000 cases. The plans are to curtail jury trials by 50%. So that's 7,000 taken out of the system. Look, I think we've got to address the reality, which is a crisis in the criminal justice system, a backlog of 80,000 cases in the Crown Court, and a backlog of nearly 400,000 in the magistrates. But the government are arguing this is about putting victims first. And the truth of this, even on the MOJ's modelling, which wasn't really modelling at all, it says that will be something in the order of about a 3% overall percentage point saving. That would mean if somebody's waiting for a trial, a victim of a crime or an alleged victim of a crime was waiting 12 months for the trial to be heard, they'd be waiting 11 months and 3 weeks. The point is, it will not make one difference, and there are other better alternatives to doing away with the right of a person who is tried with a serious criminal offence. These are not daft cases, they're not petty. 3 years is the tariff that the government are coming up with. 3 years in prison is a long time. In prison, it ruins lives, it ruins families, it takes away the opportunity, once you're freed from that sentence, to do a decent job of work. If it's an offence of dishonesty, you're unemployable, is the reality. David Lammy is the man who wrote the book on this. It affects as well ethnic minority members disproportionately to others. The judiciary, the circuit judges, I think there's something in the order of 640 of them are white. I think 62 are ethnic minority, 42 is unknown. The very vast majority public school, privately educated, white men over the age of 55. I'm worried.
Why didn't you vote against it then?
Well, because I'm not as daft as I look, Ian.
Well, hang on. You were threatening to force a by-election over this
actually
at one point.
Actually not true, but I'll explain that in a second. The reality is I'm not as daft as I look. I was not going to go into
Or you've been bought off by David Lammy.
I've not been bought off by anybody, I can tell you that much. I had a very interesting and constructive discussion with David Lammy yesterday evening, and I negotiated one of the rebellion to be on the Public Build Committee, which I suspect is a first, because governments don't like doing that. Anyway, that aside, the reality is these plans will not make a difference. Why didn't I vote against? Because I don't want to show the whips the numbers, but look at the numbers.
Well, 10 people voted against, and they were all the usual suspects.
They were. I wasn't one of them. But look at the numbers. It was a terrible result for the government, wasn't it? I think I'm right in saying there was 109 abstentions.
Yeah.
There was only 20 Labour MPs slipped. We need 80 to amend this, and we can amend it at report stage.
So you're biding your time. Is that what you're saying?
I promise you, Ian, I am confident more than ever I was that we will defeat the worst excesses of this bill. I promise.
So you didn't threaten to cause a by-election? Because I'm sure I saw you standing outside your house doing exactly that.
I tell you what happened. It was an interview I did, and I'd been put on a conduct warning for having the audacity to criticise government policy.
By
in my conversation with the Chief Whip, I said to him, don't threaten me with suspension. Because Labour MPs like me who have been loyal to the Labour Party, I've been in there 16 years and never once voted against the party in opposition or in government. Not once. Don't threaten people like me with suspension, because we're sick to death of being marched up hills to be marched back down again, time after time after time. I don't read the Parliamentary Labour Party brief anymore. I stopped reading it about 5 minutes after I was elected in 2010. It's a good job I don't, because I'd be spinning round in circles. We don't know what we're doing at times. So that's the point I was making. Don't threaten to suspend Carl Turner, loyal Carl Turner. Be careful that I'm so cheesed off I say I've had enough and I'm off.
Is there a likelihood of that happening in the future, do you think? I mean, if they persist with this, and bear in mind, and we should remind our listeners, that David Lammy was arguing to keep jury trials, 5 years ago? So he seems to have undergone a bit of a conversion on
Passionately. David Lammy wrote the Lammy Report for David Cameron in 2016. I think David Cameron, as Prime Minister, asked him to do that report. It was published in 2017, I think after David Cameron had left office, as it happens. So he knows how it affects ethnic minority people disproportionately to have a single judge as opposed to a jury of 12 men and women, good and true, who can share the unconscious bias in deliberations in the privacy of a jury room. He knows the effects of that. I'm disappointed with David. But the reality is this, look, will I cause a by-election over this? I don't think I'll need to, frankly, because I'm confident tonight with those numbers that we're going to beat this amendment. But we wouldn't have beat it by marching my 67 through the division lobby so that the whips can then pick them off.
Oh, you've got 67?
I had 67, but there's more. Because during the course of the debate, people will come into me saying, I'm abstaining. Because they'd listen to the speeches, they'd listen to ministers, they weren't convinced by ministers. Listen, I'm confident. I think we'll beat them, and we'll remove the jury trial curtailment stuff. We'll remove the powers of magistrates to sentence for 18 months to 2 years, potentially. We'll remove the bits that are just utterly damaging and are not necessary.
So basically, there won't be much left.
Well, there will. 90% of the bill is excellent stuff. It's stuff that we desperately need. It's stuff that the Labour Party in opposition spoke to. It's the stuff that we've said we'll implement to help the crisis for violence against women and girls. All of that stuff we support. We don't support doing away with the right for somebody who's accused by the state to be represented properly in criminal proceedings and have a jury of the peers to decide their innocence or guilt. Judges don't want it. I had one on this morning to me, still a judge currently, didn't want to be named. Spoke to me this morning, he said, listen, I'm in a trial that's 3 weeks in. It's supposed to last 5 weeks. If these plans come in, I'll be retiring 7 years early than I ever expected to, because I'm not standing around to put up with this nonsense. It's unworkable.
We will hear from Sam and David in just a moment on this very subject, but I thought it was important to let Carl give his side of the story there. It's 8:34, news headlines on LBC with Matt Hewitt.
MPs have backed the government's Victims and Courts Bill at its first Commons hurdle, which could see an end to the right to a jury trial in England and Wales for some crimes. The Justice Secretary says the law would help reduce huge backlogs in the Crown Courts. The Royal Navy's warship HMS Dragon is now making its way to the eastern Mediterranean to protect British interests there. It comes as the US says it's drawing up ways of keeping ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz, the main way of getting oil out of the Gulf states. And drivers on the London Underground will stage a series of 24-hour strikes starting this month. Members of the RMT union will walk out in a row over hours on the 24th of March, then again on 2 dates in both April and May. LBC weather, wet and windy tonight with heavy rain pushing in from the west, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours, lows of 4 to 10 degrees.
This is LBC.
OK, do emails. Burnt toast. And now I've got to sort my repeat prescription.
Or just tap the NHS app.
The one I've already got?
Yep, you can check test results, view your GP health record and request repeat prescriptions anytime, anywhere.
All while the kettle's boiling?
Before it boils. And turning on notifications means you'll know the moment you get a new message. We're delivering an NHS fit for the future. Never miss a message. Request repeat prescriptions and more when you tap the NHS app.
1983 election, she's won a landslide second term.
Police have been deployed to disperse crowds as the poll tax riots escalate.
Credit crunch is continuing to spread from the USA.
Britain has left the European Union. I mean, the list goes on. Boris, Liz,
We've
Rishi.
helped Britain invest through 45 years of change. That's why we're the UK's #1 investment and savings platform, trusted by 2 million people. Hargreaves Lansdown, helping Britain invest for it all. Investment returns vary. For claim verification, visit hl.co.uk.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:36. We understand that Zoe Williams thought she was on next week rather than this week, so we'll forgive her for that. With us on the panel, we have Carl Turner, Labour MP for Hull East, Lord David Frost, non-affiliated peer, and the relatively recently appointed Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. How's it going? You know that whenever we have anyone from the IEA on this programme, the text board lights up saying, "Oh, why have you got them on? Because we don't know who funds them." As a new broom, are you going to change that policy?
Well, every charity has the right to, if its donors want to remain private, they're legally able to. If donors are happy to be made public, then we make them public. And if you go to our website, you'll find some of the people who have said they're willing to be made public. But we're not exceptional. This is a fundamental provision of charity law, and it's open to anybody.
And Sam Lister is Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Express and is funded by her readers, I
Absolutely.
imagine. And advertisers. Now, let's get a quick response from you to what Carl said on jury trials. I mean, it does seem on the face of it that this was seen as a sort of major issue that many MPs were going to rebel on. Now, a lot have in terms of abstaining, but not actually voting against. Do you buy Carl's argument there?
Do you know what? I actually do. I think it is clever strategy to not reveal your hand too early in the process, because there is a long way to go. And rightly, as Carl says, the whips will just pick them off one by one. Oh, you need that school in your constituency. Oh, correct. That indiscretion, whatever. You know how the whips work. So I think that's very sensible, actually. And I also thought Carl made a very good point when he talked about how Labour MPs have been marched up this hill and back down. So actually the willingness of backbenchers to do that dance, you know, they are fed up and they're quite tired, I think. So I do actually buy that. And I think, well, we'll see on the next stage where we get to. But I think that does make a lot of sense. I think on the wider issue, I would just say that there is a letter 3,000 lawyers have signed, objecting to the policy. And I think you could say, well, they wouldn't they? But
would you? Because when it started, I wondered whether that would be the case. I thought that lawyers might actually welcome the abolition of jury trials.
Possibly, yeah. But I suspect that the jury trial process is longer, so probably your fee goes up, I would imagine. But also there's retired...
So cynical.
I'm literally paid to be cynical. But there's also the retired judges who have signed, and they don't have any reason to sign it. They're out the game, so it doesn't really affect them. I think we should put some weight on that. But I would also just say there is no evidence that this will do what it's supposed to do.
Well, Sarah Sackman, what's she? One of the Justice Ministers.
Courts Minister.
Very
good Courts Minister.
Well, she may
She's
be,
wrong on this.
but she let the cat out of the bag, didn't she, when she said, well, we'd have done this anyway, even if there hadn't been delays in the court system.
She said it was ideological and she would have done it in any event, which I think she probably misspoke, to be perfectly honest.
No, often people speak the truth when they misspeak, don't they?
But it wasn't in a manifesto, was it? And so nobody had the chance to vote on that. So if it is ideological, it should have been in a manifesto.
Yes.
People should have had the say on it, and it wasn't. And I know we haven't got much time, but I would just quickly say I did start my career spending a lot of time in magistrates' courts and in Crown courts as a reporter. It's part of the training, and I also have been a juror. So I've kind of seen it from both sides on that scale. And I think the jury system, as a juror, I was really surprised at how well it worked, really. How actually, I think there were so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And actually, we really did go backwards and forwards on the issues. And I thought it worked brilliantly. And also, as a reporter sitting in courts, you see how people get jaded, judges get jaded. I mean, even magistrate. Actually, sometimes with magistrates, it's the opposite way. They're a bit too green. But you can see the flaws in that process when you're sat in court day in, day out. You can see how the impact of even being a court reporter can make you very jaded because you're seeing, pretty bad things day in, day out. And so I think jaded judges, the jury is a safeguard against that. Yeah. And I think that's a really, really important thing that we just don't want to lose.
David?
I agree with Carl on the substantive point. I do think the jury is is so important in connecting the judicial system to what people in this country sort of think day to day and what they think is reasonable and what isn't. And a lot of people in my old party criticised some recent jury verdicts, climate change protesters, etc., etc. I didn't join that. I don't think it's right. I think it's a fundamental provision of civil liberties that a jury should be able to take its own view on a case, and if all the right-thinking people think they're wrong, that's tough. That is civil liberties.
Can I just add one thing?
Yep.
There is no financial incentive for barristers to have a trial. In fact,
I was being too cynical. I rescind that then.
No, I think you made a reasonable assumption. It's actually more profitable if a barrister who's instructed cracks a trial, because they move on swiftly to the next trial, which might then crack again. When they're stuck in trial after trial after trial, many barristers do, because the type of cases they're instructed in require a jury. Sex cases, as an example, historic allegations of rape and so on. That was never going to be a case that pleads. They're in that for 3, 4, 5 weeks. They move on to the next. They're not the barristers do well financially in the practice that they run. Barristers that crack trials do better. They do bigger volumes and they get more money as a result. So there's no financial incentive. I'll just declare an interest. My wife's a judge. She writes up judgments. This is going to require the judge hearing a trial to give reasons for verdict. It takes my missus days, sometimes weeks. I left Hull on Monday. She was writing up a judgment she'd taken a fortnight on already. That is not factored. It's a problem. There's no efficiency saving. It'll be lost by the fact that judges have to give reasons. And frankly, judges can stand behind the fact that the verdicts come in. Thank you very much, members. ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've done your public duty. We're very grateful. Off you go. Moves on to the next case. Instead of retiring for 3 weeks to write a judgment, which barristers like me and colleagues at the bar will be poring over for those appeal points. This is balmy. It's ludicrous. It ain't going to work. It's unworkable. It's unjust. It's unpopular. And it's unnecessary. David Lammy needs to change his tune. If he doesn't, I think we'll defeat him.
And how popular are you in your household? Because your wife, I guess, is being lobbied to have a little word in your ear by many of her colleagues.
Well, my wife's in a different jurisdiction. She sits in immigration tribunals. But look, the reality is lawyers, criminal barristers prosecute and defend. This idea that we want to see victims of serious crimes, rape and serious sexual assaults, languishing for years, waiting for a trial, is just a nonsense. We're as concerned, the profession rather, is as concerned as anybody.
And that speech by Charlotte Nichols today, I mean,
incredible.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I'm sorry, I texted Charlotte to say I'm sorry I wasn't in the chamber. I popped out to do an interview and I was too long. But I knew what she was going to say because she spoke to me beforehand. I've seen it since. I mean, honestly, I say this sincerely, I'm truly proud of her. Truly.
Well, she's a regular on this programme, and I think sort of all my team, we were watching that thinking, oh my God, this is so powerful. Right, we'll move on to another subject in just a few moments' time. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
Get your own UK-based account manager, a beekeeper, for support with Pension Bee. Because when your pension is in a good place, you're in a good place. When investing, your capital is at risk.
A Thameslink train is a place where you can have more me time. A chance to skip traffic and glide to wherever you need to be. With headspace to focus on more important matters. Like if that cloud is a starfish or sunflower. Fast journeys without the rush with great deals at thameslinkrailway.com. Terms apply.
It's hard to concentrate when you can't shake a health worry. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. Like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
If something's playing on your mind, AXA Health support line nurses and counsellors are ready to listen day or night. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. 24/7 health support line available to all members. Treatment for pre-existing conditions is not covered.
Shine Night Walk London is a 10k, half marathon or full marathon supported walk around the city at night on the 19th of September to raise vital money for Cancer Research UK. It's also
everyone walking with all their colours, twinkling away.
We can actually see how nice London is, and London is different at night time.
Celebration of life, and it gives hope, being able to raise money for Cancer Research UK.
Step towards a brighter future and sign up at shinewalk.org. Together, we are beating cancer.
I'm Natasha, and this is my NHS story. I went to the GP because I'd found a lump in my breast, and the GP referred me to a CDC centre. It was just really welcoming from the moment I arrived. To just be reassured all in one day was fantastic.
The government is opening new community diagnostic centres, with many already available 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so the NHS can be there for all of us when we need it. Find your closest one at gov.uk/NHS Fit for the Future, available England-wide.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:47 on LBC. Well, it says here we have a caller, Martin in Doncaster, but he seems to have dropped off the line. But I have his question here anyway, so let me read that out. After being called out by Trump over Iran, is the PM suite going to get a lot worse after the release of some Mandelson documents? Well, apparently the first batch of documents relating to vetting and due diligence process surrounding Peter Mandelson's appointment as the ambassador to the US are set to be released tomorrow afternoon, but after Sir Keir has taken questions from MPs. Are you salivating, Sam Lister?
I mean, yeah, it's going to be juicy, isn't it? It's got to be.
Well, whenever these things are built up, they tend to be a bit of a dance.
That's true, actually. Yeah, I shouldn't get too excited. Look, I think seriously, we know from COVID that once WhatsApps were examined in the light of day, nothing we put down in black and white, whether it's just to our friends or family or to work colleagues or whatever, looks great when you show it to the outside world. So I suspect it's not going to look good, is it? And I think clearly what we will be looking for is how far up the chain did all these messages go? What was the decision making process? Obviously, we know Morgan McSweeney was at the absolute heart of it. The next bit is, what did Keir Starmer know directly? What was he willfully blind to? What was he willfully deaf to? And I think there's going to be a lot of interest in trying to piece together exactly who knew what when. But this is only going to be a little part of this. This is going to go on for years. Clearly, the police have got involved and said they don't want anything out there that would prejudice anything. I think that's a bit spurious. I think there's been legal opinion that's said as such. That what is the basis for saying that?
It's just a nonsense. I can't get my head around why you would say such a thing.
It seems
I just
convenient.
don't understand. I don't understand. Genuinely, I have no idea why the police think it can prejudice any criminal proceedings. The reality is, it shouldn't. Why would it? The evidence is there to be gathered. If anything, it helps the police move their inquiries forward. It's just a nonsense, in my view. Sorry to interject.
No, and I think that's it. But really, that delays the whole process massively, which I think obviously has its advantages in that it kicks it all into the long grass. But it's also this big cloud that hangs over the government and will do for that entire time. And it will be that kind of death by a thousand cuts, won't it? Little bits of information will drip out.
Yes.
They'll be salacious. It will be, people being horrible about their colleagues, and we'll all pile in. It'll be all over the news, and it will just be this kind of drip, 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 drip. And I think that's as damaging, really, as having the full thing out and getting it over and done with, really. But
David?
I've no doubt there'll be some of the choice phrases from the WhatsApps and so on. There'll be some of that. I would be surprised if there's any really new stuff in this. I think we know the story that the vetting process, probably was not what people like me went through when we were serving diplomats. It was done a bit more quickly.
Yes, because you were in the Foreign Office, weren't you?
Yes, and so we're sort of familiar with this. But I think the story's out there, and honestly, much though I kind of enjoy seeing the government suffering from this, because I think they made some bad decisions. I think the price has probably been paid now. I think it's priced in, and the world moves on, and batch after batch of documentation. I'm not honestly sure it's really going to change anything.
Carl?
First thing I'd say is I know Keir Starmer relatively well, and he's bound to be mortified, actually. He's very embarrassed. But the truth is, I think he's over-relied on what turned out to be crap advice for the most of the time. McSweeney was the protege of Peter Mandelson. I'm told that he was helpful, Mandelson and McSweeney, to put together a list of candidates for the 2024 general election, in the hope that when Keir Starmer had done his time, some other candidate that might be preferred by that intake would take over. Look, it was over-reliance on McSweeney. I can't understand for a second why the Prime Minister sent McSweeney in a room to ask Mandelson the questions that needed to be asked, and then not expect McSweeney to return and say, oh, by the way, my pal Mandy's fine. He's absolutely superb for the job. Good to go, boss. Let's crack on. It's bonkers, in my view. It's embarrassing for the PM, and I feel for him because he will be mortified.
Well, he may be mortified, but he deserves to be, because in the end, the buck stops with him, and he was the one that decided there needed to be a change of ambassador. And I don't know if you've ever met Dame Karen Pierce. I thought she was fantastic.
I didn't meet her but I know her by reputation. It's not a party political gig necessarily. It would have been with Mandy, of course, but the reality is I'd never heard any criticism of her. No. She was doing an excellent job, and I think it's disappointing that the decision was taken to put Mandelson in there. Look, I'll declare an interest. I know Peter Mandelson not terribly well. I don't socialise with him, but he's got an association with Hull. I was one of the unlucky few, perhaps, who got a text message in the middle of the night to complain that the speaker, I think the speaker, the loudspeaker, had given information to the police that he was going to head off to the British Virgin Islands for exile. It's a strange place to go.
So Peter Mandelson texted you that?
He texted me in the middle of the night.
And you don't know him that well?
He texted others. It texted, well, I've got an association through his association with Hull. He was the High Sheriff or something. I think his grandfather had some sort of an association with the city many years ago. In 2013, we thought it a good idea, or the council did at least, to honour the fact that Mandelson was associated with Hull. And I've got to tell you, I've always had a friendship with Peter, to the extent that I'll say hello, good morning. He's a charming man.
He is.
But I'm not somebody who's socialised with him. I'm not on his branch of the Labour Party in terms of my politics either.
Well, I published his book. I'm rather offended I didn't get a text.
You did? Well,
but there we go. Right, let's move on. Actually, before we do, Andrew says, I wish some of the Cabinet would speak to Carl before announcing some of their damaging and daft policies. He talks a lot of sense and can clearly see the problems with them.
That's very kind. They don't like common sense speak, I'm afraid. As I say, I've not read a Parliamentary Labour Party brief since I went in 5 minutes after I went in. I thought I'm not going to be using that very often. And okay. I say what I think.
Right, let's go to James in Ayr. Hello, James.
Oh, hello again, Ian. My question is really for David Frost, but I'm interested in all the panel's comments on this. I wonder how the panel think Brexit has gone for the United Kingdom. And further to that, I wonder if they give me perhaps, let's say, 3 evidence benefits of the UK for Brexit.
OK, you need to buy the book, 75 Brexit Benefits, James, that the Bruges Group have brought out. But David, let's start. Now, bear in mind, we've only got 4 minutes left. I'm going to give the majority of time to you on this, but we do want to hear from the other two as well.
So I think the important thing about Brexit is that it re-established national democracy. It made our elections mean something again. We can change governments. Governments in Westminster can change all the laws they wish. That's not true of EU member states. It is true here now. But it also illustrates the point that Brexit is, if you like, it's a kind of gate that the country has to go through. It's a way to some opportunities. You have to still take those opportunities. What it does is free you up to take them, and we've taken some of those. We've reduced tariffs. We've liberalised some laws, financial services. We were in the process of liberalising a lot of our agri-food laws until the government reset changes them. Our trade policy is our own once again, but you have to be willing to take those opportunities. We haven't done enough, and that's why people feel Brexit is not, delivering necessarily what they want.
And is that why you're not a Conservative peer? You're a non-affiliated. I'm
non-affiliated because I'm at the IEA.
Oh, right,
it's a charity. You can't be a party affiliated.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, look, I think, unsurprisingly, I probably do agree with David on pretty much everything he said. But I think the fundamental thing is the point about the elections. You vote in an election now. There is no ability for the government of the day or the opposition to say that's nothing to do with us, Gov, sorted out in Brussels. They are responsible. They cannot outsource the blame to Brussels anymore. And I think that really is quite a crucial thing. We now have a government that must be accountable. I think the fact that you can have, obviously, all those things like control over agriculture, control over our VAT policy, we could slash red tape and make ourselves a more dynamic nation. All those things which I wish we could do more with. I think that the key thing that I would like to see, and we as a paper would like to see, is something that was absolutely at the heart of the campaign for Brexit, which is proper control of our borders. And obviously that's not just down to the Labour government. The previous Conservative government obviously struggled with that as well. But I think proper control of our borders should be at the heart of everything we do now.
Carl.
Well, look, 74% of those that voted in the referendum in my constituency voted Leave. It's a massive number. So there's no political advantage. I suspect the very vast majority of them still think they did the right thing. But I can't see any benefits, I've got to be honest. I think the small boat crisis has been exasperated by the fact that more people are coming in that way now. Dublin 3 regs did affect things in the sense that you could send them back to the country they'd come from.
How many were sent back in the previous year?
Well, not many.
13.
Yeah, not many is the truth. But there was an ability to do it. And I think we're in a position now where we can't point to the benefits. I think it's been...
Well, David just did. Answer.
Well, I'm not sure the benefits, but not economic benefits, which is what we need to get to increase the economy, do better, get more money in our pockets, and actually not be in a cost of living crisis perpetually, which is where we are now.
But of those 74% of your constituents who voted Leave, what percentage do you think voted to Leave because they thought they were going to get richer because of it?
I think people thought that they were going to be better off as a result of it. I do, and I think the reality is, Ian, when not much changes for certain people, whether it's a Labour government or a Tory government, I think they're looking desperately for something to improve their lives. If you're going to work in the morning, getting on your bike and pedalling to the factory, and at the end of the week, you're not better off, really. You're looking for something that's going to change things.
Okay.
I think they did better under Labour government between 1997 and 2010, but not better enough is the reality, and they thought Brexit was going to be the answer to the prayers.
Let's move on to our fun question. It's from Matty, who says more than half of parents admit that they've eaten Easter eggs meant for their children. Prior to the Easter weekend itself, what is your Easter egg of choice? Now, Sam, do you have children?
No, I don't. No, so I've got nobody's eggs to eat.
I was going to ask you for an admission there, but there we are.
No, and I would quite happily eat any Easter egg, but I think probably if anyone was to buy me something for Easter, given the situation we're in, I'd probably ask, given the price at the pump, for a couple of jerry cans of petrol. That'd be more useful to me than an Easter egg.
David?
Gosh, well, it has been known that I've eaten my kids' Easter eggs at a time. I know it's a childish case. I like the chocolate buttons, Cadbury's buttons. So one of those, keep our fingers off the nuclear and missile buttons, and have some chocolate buttons.
Oh.
I wouldn't have the bottle to eat my Stella's Easter egg.
She'd complain to Rachel Reeves.
She would indeed. I've got a bit of a thing for Terry's chocolate orange. I've got to tell you. I quite enjoy that with a
me too.
Cup of hot tea.
I can't believe none of you have mentioned Cadbury's cream eggs.
Well,
I'd like a giant one.
Yes,
they're not as good as they used to be.
No, they aren't. They're not as big as they used to be either.
Yeah.
That's because we've left the EU, of course.
Oh, here we go. Right, thank you all very much indeed. On tomorrow's panel, we have Labour MP Barry Gardiner, the New World columnist Lucy Reid, and the businessman Tony Earnshaw. Right, coming up in the next hour, a government minister has told LBC that police should take action against the organisers of a march due to take place in London this weekend, which opponents claim will glorify the Iranian regime and contain anti-Semitic messages. A cross-party group of MPs and peers have called on the Home Secretary to take action to prevent the march from going ahead, because there are also concerns that it could trigger unrest because of the war in Iran. Do you agree with them? Is it sensible to say that there's just no way this march can be allowed to go ahead? Or would banning this march be another nail in the coffin of our right to protest in this country, however morally awful you might think the protesters' messages are? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the Justice Secretary's controversial court changes have passed their first Commons hurdle despite a small Labour rebellion. David Lammy wants to scrap jury trials in England and Wales for all but the most serious cases to cut a Crown Court's backlog.
There's a particular kind of silence that now echoes through the corridors of our courts. And it's not the silence of a jury carefully weighing the evidence. It's the silence of waiting.
Labour's Carl Turner abstained and told Iain Dale he's confident that in the end, jury trials won't be curtailed.
We don't support doing away with the right for somebody who's accused by the state to be represented properly in criminal proceedings and have a jury of the peers to decide their innocence or guilt. Judges don't want it.
A top Iranian official has warned Donald Trump, be careful not to get eliminated yourself. It follows threats from the US president to hit the country 20 times harder if it continues to block the Strait of Hormuz. The US says it's drawing up ways of keeping ships moving there, as it's the main way of getting oil out of the Gulf states. Former CIA Director John Brennan told LBC the conflict will continue.
The Iranians are very patient. They believe that they can outlast the Americans and the Israelis. I don't think that even if Donald Trump wants to end the war tomorrow or this week, it means that this conflict and this tension between the United States and Iran is going to end anytime soon.
British warship HMS Dragon has begun its journey to Cyprus 10 days after an RAF base was hit on the island. Former footballer Joey Barton has been remanded in custody until he appears in court again next month. He's been charged with the assault of a man at a golf club on Merseyside on Sunday. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister says we won't be asked about whether digital ID should be mandatory. Ministers have started a consultation over the proposals, which they say will save the taxpayer billions of pounds. And Arne Slot's 100th game in charge of Liverpool ended in 1-0 defeat to Galatasaray in Turkey in the last 16 of the Champions League. Tottenham Hotspur have had a terrible start to their first leg, trailing 4-1 going into the second half at Atletico Madrid. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 162 points at 10,412. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather. Wet and windy tonight, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours. Lows of 4 to 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
9:05 on LBC. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us. One of the dilemmas that I think the police have had over the years, and indeed successive governments, is this conflict between the right to free speech and freedom of expression and also law and order. And I think that is the conflict I want to talk about in this hour. When does law and order triumph over the right to free speech? Because this coming Sunday, there's going to be, or there's planned to be, an Al-Quds march going through London. And this is a march that's taken place every year for quite a number of years. It has become quite notorious in some ways. And partly because of some of the slogans that are chanted, partly because of some of the placards that are held. Al-Quds Day was suggested by the Iranian regime many, many years ago. And there are fears that this march could effectively be a propaganda exercise for a country that, OK, we're not at war with, but it's tantamount to that. Alicia Kearns, the Conservative MP, was talking to Andrew Marr earlier, and she certainly thinks it should not go ahead on law and order grounds. There are many Labour MPs that think the same. I think there was a government minister today told LBC that she thought it shouldn't go ahead. But in the end, it is down to the Metropolitan Police to decide whether it does go ahead. Now, if they decide that they can't police it, then they will ask the Home Secretary to ban it. So that's a question really for you this hour. Should the Home Secretary ban it, or should freedom of speech triumph, even if it is sort of pretty awful what a lot of the people on this march are going to say? Well, as I said a few moments ago, it wasn't a few moments ago, it was earlier today, my LBC colleague Nick Ferrari spoke with the Justice Minister, Sarah Sackman, about this march, and she made clear that she's strongly opposed to it.
I'm on record as having called out this march even before the current conflict in the Middle East. Those expressing support for the malign regime in Iran and the IRGC and its proxies have no place in our society. They shouldn't be on the streets of London calling for hate and hostility against this country. That's thoroughly anti-British, and I expect the police and the Home Secretary to take the necessary action against those people.
I.e. to ban the march? Minister?
Well, I think at the end of the day, that's a decision for the Home Secretary and the police. But I'm very clear that kind of behaviour is not legitimate, and we should be doing everything we can to quash that kind of hatred on the streets of this country.
So surely it follows the IRGC should be proscribed.
Well, the government has already said and is already sanctioned members of the IRGC.
No, but the organisation as a whole. I hear your strong views and your history of concern over this organisation. Why isn't it prescribed? Why isn't it banned, Minister?
Yeah, my understanding is that the government intends to prescribe it. It's not as straightforward as that because of legal issues with it being a state and not a non-state actor. But the fact that this government has taken further steps to sanction and prescribe 500 of the individuals associated with the regime, I think is a positive one. But look, I'm supportive of measures that we can take against this malign regime because I'm clear that not only is it sowing chaos right across the Middle East, causing misery for civilians of many countries, it also presents a very real and present danger to British people on British soil.
Well, that was Sarah Sackman there, the Courts Minister. Let's talk to Lord Walney, formerly John Woodcock, of course, independent peer, who's a former independent advisor on political violence and disruption to the UK government. John, thank you for coming on the programme tonight. Now, you've got a report out tomorrow, I think, on the influence of the Iranian regime over the UK charity sector. I might ask you about that in a bit. But what is your view in general on whether this particular march should go ahead?
I agree entirely with Sarah Sackman, and it's telling that a government minister is prepared to speak out about it. It shouldn't go ahead, and I very much hope that the police will be able to come to the conclusion that even under the existing framework of laws, which are very tightly drawn over the potential prohibition of a march, even under those criteria, there is the significant risk of serious disorder in the current climate, where, as you said, we are close to a state of conflict with Iran, even though we have not declared outright hostilities. They have been absolutely clear that they consider us as the enemy. There is the potential for further violent clashes between supporters of the Iranian regime and those who oppose it. You've seen that in Manchester last week. And so in those circumstances, the police, if they consider it to be sufficiently grave a risk, are obliged to apply to the Home Secretary to prevent the march from going ahead. But frankly, we should not have to put that as a bar. There ought to be a way in these exceptional circumstances, given the closeness of the alignment between Al-Quds and this Iranian regime. In this environment, we should be able to stop the march on national security grounds, and it is a gap that those powers do not exist for ministers to do that.
But this march is being held on the last Friday of Ramadan for many, many years. I think that there have been, there have been incidents in the past that have been pretty unsavoury. But I don't think anybody's suggested in the past that it should not go ahead. We're not at war with Iran.
Oh, we absolutely have. I take your point. It has been going on for a long time. As you rightly said in the introduction, it was initiated by the Iranian regime. It is to call for the complete destruction of Israel. Every year, it ends up being essentially a festival of Jew hatred, which I think is highly questionable at the best of times. But in this particular environment, it makes it all the more inappropriate that something so closely aligned happen.
I kind of agree with that, but I mean, surely free speech and freedom of expression is an important part of our democracy. And even though you and I would both absolutely be against all of the chants that they're going to do on Sunday if it does go ahead, surely in the end we have to come down on the side of freedom of speech.
Well, freedom of speech is is an essential plank of our democracy, but it has never been the case that the freedom of speech in this country has been absolute. You are not free to incite racial hatred, for example. You are not free to incite disorder, and you're not free to express support or encourage people to join prescribed terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, both of whom are funded by the Iranian regime. And the problem has been that although those things are criminal, when you are in the middle of a march with thousands, if you're a police officer looking at a march with thousands of people going past, the atmosphere may be quite heated. It's very difficult for that limited number of officers to step in and make an arrest on seeing someone as they go past. So it tends to be that what they say is that they will try and record the influence and go back on footage and try and find them. But as you can imagine, that's very difficult to do. So what these essentially end up being are platforms for criminal extremism, and that is not a good thing for our city at the best of times, but particularly in this environment.
Just a minute on this report that you're issuing tomorrow on the influence of Iran over UK charities. I mean, I don't know if there's an embargo on it, or if I'm potentially breaking that by even asking you about it. What's the main conclusion?
That there is a network of charities that are aligned to the Iranian regime, which are not appropriate. They are some of them are clearly breaking charity regulations. I mean, the link. One of the links here is that the charity which is related shares an office with the Islamic Human Rights Commission, who are the organisers of the Al-Quds Day March, is one of the organisations that I investigated, and it shows that there is a really extensive network there, and that the regulations and the structures that we have to prevent charity law being abused, many of them get tax breaks through this, it is not sufficient, because investigations take years to carry out, and they often end up just focusing on particular governance issues like who is a trustee, where thankfully the government, I think, is listening on this and has said it will beef up the powers of the charity commission to be able to tackle extremism. But I think my report is going to show that is essential and it's urgent in the situation regarding Iran.
And how many charities have you found do have these links? And is the Iranian government actually funding them directly or indirectly?
I looked at 10 charities. The IHRC Trust was one of them. The Dar al Hekma Trust, the notorious Islamic Centre of England. Often the funding patterns are very difficult to prove, and it is certainly not the case that these organisations are directly plotting terrorist attacks, or often you're able to show a direct link, often with the Islamic Republican Guard Corps. But the levels of overlap and influence with individuals and key parts or senior people within the Iranian regime, or institutions that are central to that hardline regime, is very striking as an overall pattern.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight, John. That's Lord Walney there, independent peer, and this report will be coming out tomorrow. Right, we're going to take your calls in a minute, and we'll be talking to a former Metropolitan Police officer who observes public order events for the website Police Oracle. It's 9:17.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes Take a deep breath and come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
At TfL, we're helping make roads safer. We're continuing to roll out lower speed limits because 20 miles per hour roads have already seen 24% fewer collisions causing death or serious injury. We're also improving junctions to help keep you safe and improving visibility for our bus drivers with new wing mirror cameras. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Comparison of collisions data before and after implementation of 20 miles per hour speed limit.
Wrong tool for the job? Don't make that mistake with your van. Get up to 30% off selected new Toyota vans and pickups with a warranty up to 10 years or 100,000 miles with every qualifying routine service. Visit your nearest Toyota centre or visit toyota.co.uk/van savings for more details. Savings on selected vans and pickups ordered by the 31st of March 2026. UK residents. See toyota.co.uk for full details. T's and C's apply.
This year at Amazon, we're increasing the electric vehicles used for deliveries across Europe to over 10,000. It's a difference you'll notice on your doorstep, where babies are made a fuss of, where we deliver footballs for kids' kickabouts, and where they deliver the football straight into next door's garden. Can they have their ball back, please? We're delivering change where it matters, on your doorstep. Based on projected delivery service partner vehicles across the UK and EU by end of 2026.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
19 minutes past 9 on LBC, 0345 6060 973. Should this Al-Quds March go ahead on Sunday or not? And what about this conflict between freedom of speech and law and order? Chris Hobbs joins me, former Metropolitan Police officer who served for more than 30 years and now observes public order events for the website Police Oracle. Chris, very good evening. Apologies for keeping you waiting.
No problem.
What's your view on whether this march should go ahead?
Well, looking at it from a policing perspective, personally, I'm not sure there will be enough grounds as regulations, laws, etc. currently stand for it to be cancelled. Now, I've been at the last two. On one, I was threatened and intimidated by some of these people. They're not a particularly pleasant crowd, and they're not particularly easy to police. But the general rule of thumb is that the potential for disorder, it has to be serious disorder. And by that, we're looking at the sort of disorder we saw in 2011 or more recently after the Southport tragedy. I don't think that any police officer in the Met would think that the potential for that level of disorder exists for Sunday. There may well be disorder because feelings are running very, very high, and I'm sure the Al-Quds numbers will increase considerably over previous years because they have dual interests now in terms of Palestine and Iran. And there will be opposition to it. The other issue, of course, is if you did ban it, there is a chance, a very good chance, I think, that people will still turn up. And in a way, because conditions can't be imposed because it's banned, then that could make life even more difficult, where you've got groups, maybe 100 strong, running around the streets trying to do battle with each other and the police. When you impose conditions, and there will be strict conditions on the march and the counter-protest, that gives the police much better leverage to control things from the start. But that's not to say there's not going to be disorder, because, as I say, my impression is feelings are running particularly high, and I don't think, police officers, frankly, this is another subject, but they are so fed up with policing protests and being taken away from their boroughs where they work in their own communities. They are sick to death of it, and that's one of the reasons why at the moment we are losing officers. So, but bottom line, no, I don't think the justification exists with the present rules and regulations for it to be banned. I might want to see it banned, but at the moment it couldn't be justified based on all that we know about Al-Quds, the groups that will be supporting it and those who will be opposing the march.
Just tell me more about the kind of people that you've observed over the last 2 years on these marches, because there are always different kinds of protests and marches. A lot of them seem to be dominated by people carrying Socialist Workers' Party placards. I think that a lot of those are in evidence on the sort of Saturday Palestine marches that have been taking place. But, is the demographic makeup of these marches rather different to those, do you think?
I think probably what you're going to see on Sunday is a lot more younger people, young men especially. You still get a lot of young girls, but young men in their sort of late teens, early 20s, 30s, who will be taking part. That's what I've seen in previous years. In terms of the Palestine protests, the Solidarity Campaign protests, I've been to every single one of the 37, I think they've reached. But by and large, in terms of physical disorder, there's been very little.
Mm.
The arrests there have been for things like placards or chanting, but in terms of fighting, very, very little. And the makeup is really strange because you've got youngsters, young Muslims, young Muslim guys, young Muslim girls. You've also got, as you alluded to earlier, you've got quite a strong band of what I would call, I don't wish to be unkind, but Labour crusties, those from the sort of left, tending to be older people. You've got Jewish groups, would you believe? There's a couple of Jewish groups, and they are there in fairly substantial numbers. So you've got a real mixture, and I think because the marches are fairly big, the troublemakers tend to be diluted amongst these people. Where you get more trouble is where you get the smaller, what they call emergency protests. So, right, we want everyone at Downing Street by 6 o'clock. And what you tend to get there are younger protesters all grouped together, and that's where you tend to get some sort of disorder. It's not massive. You haven't had lots of police officers injured, but you do get pushing, shoving, maybe the odd punch or kick. So the smaller protests at the moment tend to attract greater levels of disorder. And on top of that, you've got the Palestine Action, where you've had hundreds of people basically surrendering themselves to be arrested. And a lot of those, strangely enough, are older people who put them. And sometimes you feel when you get people 70 plus getting carted off, you think to a certain extent, they're being exploited. But in terms of serious mass disorder on these Palestine protests in London, the big protests, there's been some, but it's basically been very little, and the police have been able to cope with it. Maybe different on Sunday.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your time this evening. This is a difficult one, isn't it? Because for those of us that really cherish freedom of speech, freedom of expression, this is incredibly difficult. I totally understand if you are Jewish, you probably are going to think that this march should be banned. If you are an Iranian who really hates the regime in Iran, you probably want this banned as well. And I completely understand that. But in the end, the decision the Home Secretary has got to make is going to be on the recommendation of the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, and he will have to send her a letter saying, I want you to ban this for the following reasons. I don't know if that letter has been sent. I don't know if the decision is imminent. I mean, somebody's just sent a tweet to me on Twitter saying, well, she has banned it. Well, we can find no verification of that whatsoever. So we'll see if we can find out more details on that before the end of the programme. But in your gut, do you think that it would be justified to ban this march, even though we know that some pretty unsavoury things are going to be chanted? There will be anti-Semitic comments made. This is not me alleging these things. These things have happened in the past, as we've heard from Chris Hobbs there. If there is evidence that it could turn violent, do you think it would be justified to ban it? 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Ambrosine, who's in Finchley. Ambrosine, very good evening. What would you like to say?
Iain. As you may know, I run Eye on Anti-Semitism. We have countered the Al-Quds protest over decades. I've been to police lineups. I've been to court to take some of these really horrific I won't mention the names of the people to court, and the cases have been dropped. We managed through protests and through illegal means, through UK LFI, get the Hezbollah flag banned, if you remember, a few years ago. The problem is this. You can prescribe the Iranian regime or parts of it, but it's not the Iranian regime we're talking about. It is the proxy NGOs here. You mentioned one. There are a few others who have not been prescribed. And the money is filtered through these organizations to hold these protests. Now, the question you've asked is, do you want this protest banned? So on Saturday, that there was a large protest in favour of stop bombing. There is usually no violence, although there has been scuffles with this Al-Quds march. It is merely the vile rhetoric that is chanted by it's usually Nazim Ali, but I don't believe he's going to be at this one. I'm not sure. You've asked the question, should it be banned? My answer to that is no. The reason I say that is that we get more information about who in this country is, stirring up the racial hatred, stirring up the domestic terrorism, stirring up anti-Semitism, etc., from these marches, and that we take videos as the police do and photographs. We get more information about who these people are than if you banned it. If we completely banned it, then this information we wouldn't be able to get. So we actually use it as a tool of information on the anti-Semitism, as I said, the domestic terrorism, the people that we need to watch. And I will tell you that the organisations, we've had skirmishes before. They are pretty violent. They've been attending many, many marches, and a lot of them walk as security. So they wear the yellow, the fluorescent jackets. I don't believe it should be banned because, as I said, the information that we gather and the police gather from, and the terror departments gather from these marches are so important that banning them would just basically make it all invisible.
Okay, well, very clear. Thank you very much indeed, Amberstein. I think we do have to return to the freedom of speech side of this, and I haven't actually given a definitive view on whether I think this march should be banned. It's one of those for me where my heart says, yes, ban it. I don't want to hear these things on the streets of London. But my head says this would set a very unfortunate precedent. And remember the old saying, I may hate what you say, but I defend your right to say it. I think that has to come into effect here. So unless the Metropolitan Police have firm evidence that this could descend into violence, I wouldn't be in favour of banning it, I have to say. What about you? 0345 6060 973. It's 9:32 on LBC News Headlines with Matt Hewitt.
HMS Dragon has left Portsmouth to protect RAF bases on Cyprus 10 days after one of them was attacked. The Defence Secretary John Healey says 6 weeks of work to prepare the warship was done in 6 days. A top Iranian official has warned Donald Trump, be careful not to get eliminated yourself. The US says it's drawing up ways of keeping ships moving in the Strait of Hormuz during the Middle East conflict. It's the main way of getting oil out of the Gulf states. And controversial reforms to the court system have passed their first hurdle in the Commons. The proposals would restrict jury trials to only the most serious cases. LBC weather. Wet and windy tonight with heavy rain pushing in from the west, becoming clear across England and Wales during the early hours, lows of 4 to 10 degrees. A breezy day tomorrow with some sunny spells and some blustery showers for Scotland, highs of 13.
This is LBC.
OK, who's all in for Cancer Research UK's Race for Life?
We're doing Pretty Muddy.
It's an obstacle course.
There's one for kids.
Runners.
Walkers.
Book clubbers.
Nick clubbers.
10-pin bowlers.
Choir singers.
Lake swimmers.
Gardeners.
Whether you climb it,
slide it,
or crawl it.
Go all in against cancer.
All in to help fund life-saving research.
Sign up now
to your local 3K, 5K, 10K or Pretty Muddy event from just $14.99. Search Race for Life. Prices vary by event distance and participant age.
Amazon offers term time working to their employees, like Anton, who's home to look after his daughters during their holidays.
Hello?
To him, this is the best sound in the world. Actually, maybe that's the best sound of all. Now that's term time working, offered at Amazon. 10 weeks off guaranteed per year. Mix of paid holiday and unpaid time off. Conditions apply.
At TfL, we're helping make roads safer. We're continuing to roll out lower speed limits because 20 miles per hour roads have already seen 24% fewer collisions causing death or serious injury. We're also improving junctions to help keep you safe and improving visibility for our bus drivers with new wing mirror cameras. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Comparison of collisions data before and after implementation of 20 miles per hour speed limit.
Iain Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
9:34 on LBC. Let's take a text here. It is from... Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Here we are, it's from Dennis. I think the march on Sunday should still go ahead, even though I disagree with their policy and ideology. The only valid reason for stopping it would be if the police judged it to pose a genuine health and safety risk or a serious likelihood of conflict with other groups. That said, the police can also find such events useful for gathering intelligence, including facial recognition, which can help prevent potential terrorist activity. Well, that's kind of what I suppose I said just before the news there. So, Dennis, I rather agree with you on that. Scott's in West Hampstead. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Ian. You stole my thunder. I was about to say the same thing. About
well, say it again, just for the laughs.
Techniques. I mean, there will be individuals there who are already known to the police, perhaps from previous protests, and it is right. The police would be able to gather intelligence, to keep a very close eye. I think the march should go ahead. I've been to some of I've observed. I've not been on any of the demonstrations of Palestine protest march, but often I'm down in the Charing Cross area, Trafalgar Square area on Saturdays, where I sell at a collector's market, and I've seen in many of the protests, and they've mostly been peaceful. I mean, there are going to be some individuals who are possibly violent agitators. But, I mean, you're right, what you said earlier about free speech. I mean, it is a kind of quandary, really, a dilemma, because you want to protect free speech. And I agree with what the police officer said about, yes, there's a lot of police time taken up. While the police time's taken up with that, then there are other things the police could be doing that they're not able to do because, the resources are limited in terms of the police staff. But I think it should go ahead, but the police just, as you said earlier, facial recognition techniques and any other methods, and just keep a very close eye on people.
It is a function of the police, though, to police protests. I mean, that's always been the case. And I get the argument, well, it's scarce resources and all the rest of it. But, I mean, your democracy starts to sort of wither on the vine, doesn't it? If we say, well, we can't police protests because we haven't got the resources, I think that's a bit of a slippery slope.
It is a bit of a slippery slope because, I mean, the police obviously need to prioritise what they're doing on particular days. I mean, that's for the chief of the Met chief to the commissioner to decide upon. But yes, I think we need to protect democracy. And I'd be worried if we didn't let this protest go ahead. What might these people be doing, or some of these people, not maybe just a few of them, be doing if they kind of, they're fueled up with anger and, they go off and do other things and perhaps a risk to the public in other ways. No, I would let the process go ahead.
OK, Scott, thank you very much indeed. Right, let's take a couple of texts here. 0345 6060 973. Do you think that the protests should go ahead, or are you really concerned about some of the things that might be said that would be incredibly offensive, particularly anti-Semitic chants, which we know take place on these kinds of marches? I mean, I just don't understand anybody who goes on a march and just is hateful to another group of people. And you can disagree with something without being hateful towards either an individual or a group of people. But that seems to be totally anathema to these people. And I suppose if you support, as many of them will do, the regime in Iran, well, I suppose that's where you get your hate from, isn't it? Because they are people who support that regime have almost been indoctrinated to be hateful. It's a shame that's the case, but we all know it is. Jonathan says, I despise these people, but freedom of speech remains sacrosanct, providing it is within the law. My ultimate question is why these people are marching on the streets of London with these values. Why not go to Tehran? Well, the fact that a lot of these people are here in the first place makes you wonder why, if they hate democracy, if they hate our way of life so much, why are some of them even here? But even more important than that, a lot of the people that will be on this march are actually British born and bred. And you think, what are you doing? What is going through your head to go on a march to effectively sympathise and support a despotic regime, a tyrannical regime, an evil regime that kills tens, hundreds of thousands of its own people without a blink of an eye? They have no value for human life whatsoever. They certainly have no value for minorities. And yet you have what Carl Turner earlier called, called the crusties on the left, who seem to think that just because the Iranian regime is against Israel and against Trump, that therefore it should be supported. I mean, what kind of logic is that? What kind of perverted, horrible logic is that? Your enemy's enemy is your friend, I suppose, is what it comes down to. But when you look at all the examples that we know of the beheadings, of the gay people that have been thrown off buildings and killed, what about the attitude of the Iranian cleric that I saw the other day on Instagram, who was telling everybody that women are basically animals in human form and are there for the pleasure of men? And yet you have left-wing women who regard themselves as feminists who will be marching on this march on Saturday to defend people like that. How sick must you be to have that view? Robert's in Leytonstone. Hi, Robert.
Good evening, Ian. I think some restrictions will start being put in place on these, and it may not be stopping the marches, somehow limiting the size of them. And we've got to remember that should one of these turn nasty, impact of that on the UK's nation, particularly that of London, the impact on economy, tourism, investors coming to this country, and et cetera, et cetera. One does kick off and we have fighting, then whenever they arrange another meeting, you will not be able to stop it. You don't have that many police officers to take on violence and stuff like that. It'll be out of control. So we need to start limiting the size of these demonstrations, ensure that they are reasonably and will be.
But would you say the same? I mean, look, I don't know sort of what kind of policies you support, but let's say you're a member of the Countryside Alliance and they decided they wanted to protest against something that the government was going to do. They have a track record of getting a lot of people out on the streets, depending on the cause. Now, if that's a cause you agree with, you're unlikely to say that march shouldn't go ahead. We can't just decide on what we personally agree with, can we?
Not doing that. What you have to do is come up with something, and it applies to all groups. It could be, for example, on how well a group is being. If it's very well behaved and you don't get too many oppositions against them, you can allow a larger number. You have a group that is in some ways going out for trouble and using language and cards and that are quite sort of, I think, some of them violence, imposing and requesting and putting out on social media. I think that they need to be limited in size. So what we need to do is just come up with something published, and groups have to follow that. You know, they lose the chance to demonstrate.
But we already have those rules in place. I mean, I don't know how you would change the current rules.
In that case, limit the numbers. They're obviously allowing too much.
But surely the whole point of protesting is to demonstrate to the government, whoever, that there are lots of people who believe your point of view. I mean, if you restrict a march to, say, 30,000, when actually 2 million people would want to go on it, it's not going to have much effect, is it?
You've got groups that oppose the UK, oppose the government, and against freedom, like in the UK, and there are demonstration groups like that take place, then they will want to impact our economy, want to impact our reputation, and I just don't think that's a good idea, Ian, to let it go ahead. If you want impact on your economy, cutting the NHS, cutting investors come to this and jobs, fine, you go ahead and do it and allow it. That's fine. I just don't think it's a good idea, Ian. I really do not.
Well, as I say, from my point of view, I look at it as a heart versus head issue. My heart says ban it, and my head says sets a very dangerous precedent. But on the other hand, would I want to witness it? No, I wouldn't. Would I want to hear any of the disgusting things that will no doubt be chanted? No, I wouldn't. And nor should anyone else have to, I suppose. But look, there are going to be plenty of people and there are plenty of Jewish people who just won't go into the centre of London on a Saturday anymore for fear of what they might encounter. And again, we shouldn't live in a country like that. It's going to be very interesting to see whether the Metropolitan Police Commissioner does indeed write to the Home Secretary to request that this march is banned. It doesn't happen very often that they do that. It has happened in the past, I think, on a few occasions, but there have to be exceptional circumstances. Are these exceptional circumstances? Well, the organiser of this march, a man called Masood Shajari, he's chair of the Islamic Human Rights Commission. He's written to Mark Rowley quite a long letter explaining why it should go ahead, basically saying all the people that are against it going ahead are being anti-Muslim. Well, it's too simplistic to say that. I'm sure there are some people who would fall into that category, but I think most people just don't want this sort of thing on the streets of our capital city. 0345 6060 973. Pete says, we just need to stop all these marches. They are getting out of order. It's cost time and money. Government needs to get a backbone, but too scared of upsetting the soft people. Very simplistic, Pete, if I may say so. It's 9:46.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
10 days into the war in Iran and a UK warship finally set sail. Are you proud or embarrassed by our response? Plus, why you might end up footing the bill for child murderer Ian Huntley's funeral.
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Chase is the digital bank that boosts your savings to 4.5% AER variable.
A boost?
Yep. It includes a 2.25% AER boost for the first 12 months.
Are they being boosted now?
All the time. Bedtime, gym time, romantic dinner time. And soon you could boost your way to...
beach time.
Boost your savings with Chase. Search Chase Boosted Saver. 18 plus UK residents. Available to new Chase current account customers for their first 31 days. 4.41% gross interest paid monthly. Eligibility and T's and C's apply.
Why are you abseiling down the front of your house, Ross? You have a staircase.
I like doing things the hard way, Albert.
Try something easier, Ross. Get cheaper off-peak energy. It's available at different times, like during the day or weekends. Just get a smart meter and choose a flexible scheme or tariff.
Ooh, I could batch cook some quiche.
Perfect. With a smart meter, getting cheaper energy is easier than you think.
Eligibility varies. Action required. Schemes and tariffs available to selected customers.
A message from TfL.
I saw him in the local news a few days after. His name's Rakesh. They had to put him into a coma just because I didn't look again at that turning. He had 2 kids. How did I not see his bike ahead of me? Well, I didn't look again. He didn't make it.
Drivers, take another look, not a life. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's hard to concentrate when you're worried about your health. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. Like you can't be fully present.
Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
At AXA Health Insurance, we build our teams with people who care. So when you need us, we're here to support you. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. Pre-existing conditions are not covered.
Iain Dale on LBC.
9:48. Didn't the government allow that protest every Saturday after October the 7th, says Sam. Trouble is, it's a slippery slope not allowing things. Just a thought. Well, I think that's the main point that I was making earlier in the hour. Pete says, let the march go ahead, find out who these people are, photograph them all, deport those that are not from the UK, sanction the rest in the future, no benefits, etc. Again, I have to say that is a very simplistic way of looking at these things. Another one from Miles. We permit Tommy Robinson and his bunch of fascist thugs to run amok around central London, so why on earth would we object to people protesting the Israeli genocide, even if you find a couple of chants unsavoury? Well, I don't think that Tommy Robinson and his thugs were allowed to run amok around London. Yes, there were some arrests, but most of the people on that protest, what was it called? Unite the Kingdom, something like that. Most of those people do not fit the sort of stereotype that you put there of fascist thugs. Right, let's go to Alison in Westminster. Hello, Alison.
Hi, Ian. I am a British Iranian woman. Before people accuse me of not being Iranian, because I called you before and people have accused me not being. I am Iranian. And I'm calling to say on this occasion, I think this march should be banned, not allowed to go ahead, because I think the agenda behind it is to support the regime of Iran and the death of Ayatollah. And we know these people are just propaganda. And we just lost over 33,000 people. And I've been going to every peaceful demonstration since they killed the Iranian people who wanted their freedom in Iran. And since the last week, we see more and more aggression towards us. We don't cover our faces. These people come and cover their faces. I know your previous callers say, let them have picture, video, whatever. They come, majority of them cover their faces. If you look at if they have nothing to hide, why they cover their faces?
You make a very good point there, Alison. I think one of the things, if in my imaginary world where I was a benevolent dictator of this country, one of the first laws I would introduce would be to ban people wearing balaclavas or covering their faces on these marches.
Thank you. Absolutely, 100%. I agree. None of us want, this covering the face completely, even though some of us are fearing the government, the regime, Iranian regime, even in this country. So I think in this occasion, this march, I don't think it's going to be a peaceful one, because Iranians, I'm one of them. We're going out this Saturday to march to support the war that I know people don't agree, but it's supporting freedom of Iranian people. And they're going to come. And this is what we think, majority of us, this march for this Saturday is to support Iranian regime and Ayatollah. And you wait and see what they're going to chant and what they're going to show.
Well, I agree with every word that you've said there, I think. Because we all know what it's all about. We all know what they're going to chant. We all know what their motivations are. These people are, I believe, enemies of this country. And you might think, therefore, that I think the march should be banned. But I think they need to be identified in open air. And we need to know who they are. We know what their motivations are. They are antipathetic to this country. And I do believe they are enemies of this country. I think anyone that expresses any support for this wicked regime in Tehran is an enemy of this country. Jeff says, I think this march on Sunday should be banned. How is it that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans can be banned from attending a football match at Aston Villa for fear of violence? Yet if this march goes ahead, there is every likelihood that there will be trouble, not to mention that Starmer says he will protect the Jewish community. Let's go to Ramona, who's a first-time caller in Watford. Hello, Ramona.
Hi. I'm Iranian, a British Iranian, so I'm living here for a long time. But my family, they are living back home, and I truly know what's going on, how horrible this regime are. And I think this march definitely, I would say, big no to it. And these people only coming to, I don't know why they try to say to the world that we are protecting the terrorism, or we are protecting the people. They killing innocent people, maybe 32,000 in the country in 2 days. Why they trying to show? So I would definitely say big no to that. And we are Iranian. We want this war, and we are standing for it. My family is sitting in the house under the bombard, but they are all happy to that happen. We just get rid of this regime. But I don't know why they want to prove that, those people. As the previously, one of my, I don't know, the lady called, one of my Iranian, one of my family called and said that they are covering their face. Exactly. This is how they are. And that definitely is not, they have to be stopped.
But if we stop this march, do we not fall into a propaganda trap? I mean, the organisers of it, this is, what are they called? The Islamic Human Rights Commission. If we bow to their demands or if we bow to the demands of people to ban it, then these people can effectively set themselves up as martyrs.
Well, they can go back to their country. They can just, I don't know, this is wrong, definitely is wrong what they're doing.
OK, thank you very much, Ramona. Fraser says, free speech is an illusion. Our ability and freedom to speak freely exists, but at the mercy of the government. When allowed, freedom... Well, by the very fact that I can even read this out shows that we have freedom of speech. There's nobody sort of censoring me about what I can read out here. Anyway, Fraser continues, when allowed, freedom of speech is celebrated and often used by our leaders to pat themselves on the back. But when free speech breaches government policy at the time, then it's deemed racist, radical, and can sometimes be deemed terrorist ideology. I'd love you to give me an example of what you mean by that, because I think it's a load of old bunkum. How do people who think a certain way deal with that, especially when they know that huge numbers of people who are like-minded are being shut down and silenced? Well, who's being shut down and silenced? I mean, people often accuse me of sort of presenting a talk radio show of sort of being censored or silenced. I can say what I like within the rule of law. And I add that caveat within the rule of law because, of course, we have laws in this country governing free speech. Any democracy does. But they're not designed to inhibit people's ability to speak freely as long as they're not inciting violence or inciting racial hatred. I mean, surely any decent society would have laws that stop that, wouldn't they? Andrew's in Blackheath. Hello, Andrew.
Well, I've been absolutely outraged by what I've been hearing. Admittedly, I've only been on the Gaza marches. I'm, as you would say, on the extreme right, such as it's very rare I get put through with any good points. The British ambassador on your show last week told us that the grounds for this war in Iran were bogus. He didn't mention that the original Shah in the 50s, that if you want to put a Shah back, put the original Shah or his children, because we got rid of the original Shah so we could get cheap oil. So, I mean, I believe Iran should have like we used to have, a monarchy, parliament, whatever. I mean, that's all gone in this country now. But,
what do you mean it's all gone? Well, we have a monarchy, we have a parliament.
Freedom of speech is gone.
How?
Well, this march is a classic example. You're referring to hate speech on these marches, but you don't say what the hate speech is. the Nile.
Well, we know exactly what the hate speech is, don't we? It's anti-Semitic.
No, listen. Well, one of the hate speeches was from the river to the sea. That was deemed to be hate speech. But Jews are allowed to say Nile to the Euphrates. They're allowed to say that the future. Someone deemed to be the future Prime Minister of Israel who says Turkey's next. I mean, you just cannot pretend this is anything but bogus. All this stuff. You know,
the fact that you've just said all of that proves that we have free speech.
Yes, I've only you've put it on at the end of the show. The fact is that you don't.
Well, the fact is you didn't ring earlier in the show, Andrew. Stop making spurious and idiotic points.
You're not one of the bad presenters. I'm specifically, if I can mention the name, James O'Brien, who always you are willing to have a banter. I will admit that. But James O'Brien will only pick a right-wing paraplegic to argue with. It's
well, again, do you know, I'm tempted to press the dump button here, given you've said something so offensive there.
Really?
I haven't pressed it. I want to. No. My heart says I should, and my head says let him dig his own grave, because that's what you're doing.
Really? Well, down at my pub, there are people that support one side and the other, and there's never any arguments. It never gets offended. There's Muslims go in there, white racists you would deem. Obviously, well, I don't know what all the views are, obviously. But, I mean, I'll
tell you what, when you phone in next time, Andrew, learn to be a little bit more coherent. It might actually help your argument. Thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 1 LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, here's Ben Kentish.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian. Hello there, and a very good evening to you. Ben Kentish here with you tonight on LBC. On the show,
it'll be a fortnight we've left undefended a British military base. Without America, we are defenceless. We really have made a terrible, terrible error.
A British warship finally set sail to defend British bases in the Mediterranean today, a full 10 days after the start of the war in Iran.